Chapter 360. To be honest, List considered where the Qi secret technique might be hidden in the book, the cover, and the pages. Although the thick bass paper was thick, it was still difficult to hide another piece of paper that recorded the Qi secret technique. Moreover, a book page that hid another piece of paper was obviously different from the other pages and would be easily discovered. There was no point in hiding it like this. Therefore, he could only search in the cover. He cut open the books one by one. When he was halfway through, there was still no Qi secret technique. However, he was not discouraged. The castle's magic book collection was only 2/3 full. The remaining 1/3 was in the Seaview Villa and the other in Chrissy's house. As the saying goes, opportunities are for the prepared. When he cut open the cover of a magic book tucked in the corner of the bookshelf, a silver inner page was exposed from the scratch of the cover. Soon he pulled out the whole page. The silver paper was densely covered with serpentines, and on the back was a diagram of the human body's Qi circulation. Do families with Qi secret techniques like to preserve their family's Qi secret techniques in this way? List stroked the silver paper and judged that it was made of silver. But obviously, it is a level lower than the Vulture Knight Stefanland's gold paper. He had obtained the Qi secret technique, but he did not check it immediately. Instead, he flipped through the magic book. The book was titled Searching for the Pinch Beetle King of World of Warcraft. He vaguely remembered reading it. The content was not attractive, or rather, it was more professional. It recorded the morphological characteristics of several pinch beetles, but in the end, the book did not record any beetle in World of Warcraft. So, this magic book has nothing to do with Vulture Knight Stefanland's expedition ? Two different books, one was a knight novel and the other was a magic book, yet they concealed Qi secret skills in the same way. Moreover, both ended up in the Flower Town. List could not guess what the driving force behind this was. For example, what caused the Qi secret technique to leak, or why the Qi secret technique was placed in the book, and then how it ended up on Coral Island after traveling thousands of miles. There was no way to know. He could only treat it as luck. He shifted his gaze to the silver paper. At the top was a line of relatively large serpentines. Aura Attenuation Secret Technique, Stephanie Vulture. List stared at the title to make sure he wasn't mistaken. The author of the book was Stephanie Vulture, a Sky Knight who lived in the Blastcastle Kingdom and wrote a World of Warcraft Vulture. The secret technique of Magic Eye came from Stephanie. From the gem space, he took out the golden paper that recorded the Magic Eye, comparing the two. The names were exactly the same, and even the craftsmanship of the paper and the serpentine carvings were surprisingly the same. In other words, these two secret techniques originated from Stephanie. He might not have created them, but he must have obtained them. He's definitely not an ordinary Sky Knight. The Count was a Sky Knight, a Sacred Swordsman level Sky Knight, but the Count didn't have a single Qi secret technique. The Taro family definitely had a Qi secret technique, but as a grandson, List didn't know what it was. Every aristocratic family kept their family's Qi secret technique strictly confidential. It was a treasure that could be passed down from generation to generation, just like the elves. It was very valuable. It was basically certain that it was passed down to males and not females. What was the reason that made Stephanie leak the Qi secret technique in a covert way? List shook his head and decided not to look into it. He began to study the aura attenuation. The content was very complicated, and the Qi operation method was very tricky and strange, but it was slightly less difficult than the Magic Eye. Its effect was just like its name. It was used to weaken one's own aura. In other words, it would greatly weaken the Do Qi that one was constantly releasing. It had two uses. One was to act like a pig to eat a tiger, so that others would not be able to accurately judge one's Do Qi level. The other was to reduce the consumption of Do Qi. The relationship between a knight's body and Qi was like that of a bucket and water. However, it was not a perfect bucket, but a bucket that was constantly leaking. Therefore, a knight had to persist in training and replenish nutrition. Otherwise, the Qi refined by the body could not keep up with the Qi lost, and the total amount of Qi would continue to be lost. It was even more so when taking potions. The magic would constantly collide with the body, breaking the shackles and turning the body into a sieve. Only by constantly replenishing new potions and absorbing more nutrition could one continuously refine qi, maintain the total amount of qi, and continue to practice qi. The value of the aura attenuation lay in its ability to reduce the loss of qi through the coordination of qi operation, which indirectly saved the consumption of resources and improved the foundation of cultivation. In other words, in the past, List ate a large piece of World of Warcraft meat every day to maintain the loss of qi in his body. Now, he only needed to eat a small piece of World of Warcraft meat. In the past, when taking potions, there would always be a large amount of magic dissipating. With the help of the aura attenuation, he could greatly save potions and improve the efficiency. At the end of the introduction, there was a record of the effect of Stephanie's qi secret technique. Aura attenuation can slow down the loss of qi in the body, but the effect will weaken as the qi increases. Elite Earth Knight can slow down the loss of qi by about 3/4. Normal Sky Knight can slow down the loss of qi by 2/3. Sword Saint Sky Knight can slow down the loss of qi by half. Max Sky Knight can slow down the loss of qi by 2/5. Dragon Knight stage unknown. At the same time, because of the slowing down of qi, it will confuse other knights' judgment of their own strength. A Sky Knight can appear as an Earth Knight. Stephanie Vulture. He could be sure that when he wrote this qi secret technique, he was a Max Sky Knight. The higher the strength, the less it slows down. At the Elite Earth Knight stage, it can slow down the loss of qi by 3/4. This effect is truly amazing. List was very satisfied with the effect of the aura attenuation. Saving resources was important, but the effect of disguising strength was even better. Pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger was a necessary skill for transmigrators. Without the aura attenuation, he could pretend to be an ordinary Earth Knight in front of the Count, but in front of Marquis Merlin, he would be exposed. Chapter 361. After obtaining the aura attenuation, List immediately decided to practice it. Now that he was proficient in fire surge fluctuations and fiery dragon drill, multiple arrows, and magic eye had reached the acme of perfection, there was little point in pondering these qi secret books and qi secret skills to improve his strength. It was better to practice aura attenuation to save energy. Meanwhile, Thomas had already returned with the sorted information. Master, this is the administrative office's file on Emily, a serf in the girl group. Emily, from the Eagle Kingdom, had lost both her parents and her brother. She was 11 years old this year and was the first girl in the girl group to cultivate qi. She cultivated qi faster than most of the young serfs in the passing group. She performed well in the night class, but she still needed to attend the embroidery class. Moreover, her performance in the embroidery class was terrible. She was even terrible at threading a needle. Emily didn't get along well with her host family, mainly because she couldn't do housework and wanted to be a female knight all day long. As a result, she was often scolded. After the night class, she would rather stay in the night square than go home early. Thomas said, after reading the information, List basically understood that this girl named Emily yearned for the life of a knight. Call Rome and bring Emily along. Yes, master. Soon, Rome and Emily rushed over. Rome saluted and stood aside. List's eyes were on Emily. This 11-year-old girl was already about 1.5 meters tall. Although her face was young and her body was thin, her eyes were bright and full of expression. Her eyes were deep, her nose was high, and she had a bit of an exotic style. Compared to the people of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire and the Eagle Kingdom, she had an exotic style. Maybe she would be beautiful when she grew up. However, her skeleton was very big. Her thin body seemed a bit uncoordinated with the big skeleton. It was probably because she didn't have any flesh on her body. Your name is Emily. I heard that you don't like to be an embroidery worker? It was not the first time Emily had met List, but it was the first time she had spoken to him at such a close distance. She felt a little uneasy, but she still plucked up her courage and replied loudly in a childish but firm tone. Yes, my lord. Emily does not like to be an embroiderer. Emily wishes to become a knight. You have ambition, but do you know that for a woman, the effort required to become a knight is far greater than everyone else? Emily knows, but Emily is not afraid. List couldn't help but smile. Do you know that the resources required to groom a female knight is more than that of a male knight? If I spend a lot of resources to train you into a knight, do you know what you should do? Emily was at a loss. She was only an 11-year-old child. However, she quickly regained her composure. Sir Leader has groomed Emily. Emily is willing to serve Sir Leader for life. Even if I have to give up my life, I will never retreat. List was a little surprised by her precocious answer, as expected of a child who could attract smoke quests and pull the threads of fate. She's quite extraordinary. He nodded approvingly. I'm very satisfied with your answer, Emily. Since you've chosen a difficult path, as a lord, I'll give you a chance to change your fate. I hope that you'll fulfill your promise. Yes, my lord. Emily is willing to follow Sir and charge for Sir. Emily imitated an adult knight with her tender body and performed a follower's salute. She knelt on one knee, placed her right hand on her chest, bent her body forward in a 90-degree bow, and lowered her head to look at the ground. List walked over and helped her up. I accept you as my follower, Emily. When Emily got up and stood up excitedly, he said with a smile, You are my youngest follower, and also my first female follower. I wish you to become a glorious knight in the future and pursue glory side by side with me. As for now, you will train together with Maggie. Maggie was the most envious of all serf children because her sister was the Lord's personal guard. She received special knight training every day and made rapid progress. Emily nodded excitedly. Yes, my lord. List turned to Rome and said, Rome, personally arrange for Emily's training. In addition, tell her host parents to treat Emily well. In the future, she will no longer have to attend embroidery classes and can concentrate on knight training. Yes, my lord. Well, you can go back. List motioned for everyone to leave and said to his valet, Go and call Paris over. She called Paris just to tell her to arrange a partner for her sister, Maggie. It was a waste of resources for Maggie to enjoy knight training alone, and training alone was not as good as training with a partner. At least she could have a good reference. Paris replied, I have no opinion. In fact, I am very happy to see that Maggie has a partner. She is getting lazier and lazier during knight training. It's just that I am surprised that Lord Baron accepted an 11-year-old girl as a follower. Her longing for the knight in her eyes moved me. I believe that people with such eyes will not be ordinary in the future. Perhaps there will be a female Sky Knight among my followers in the future. List laughed. In fact, he believed in the smoke mission, not Emily herself. Paris smiled. I wish her good luck. How is your chi training going? There is no clue yet. The power of the black dragon can always assimilate the chi that I have managed to extract. Maybe your direction is wrong. The chi originates from the knight, but you already have the power of the black dragon in your body, which is a conflict in itself. You can ask Chris for advice and learn magic. It may be more reasonable to use the power of the black dragon to trigger light magic. Invisibility is one of the light magic. Many great magicians will study invisibility, and Paris, after possessing the power of the black dragon, quickly developed invisibility on her own. Well, when my chi training fails, I will turn to magic. After Paris left, List concentrated for a moment, and the smoke slowly emerged. Mission completed. Reward Dosun's new magic, Rock Wall. Rock Wall. He stood in front of the window and happened to see Trembling Woods playing with the 8 little ones under the setting sun. Suddenly, Trembling Woods opened his mouth and a rock wall rose from the manor planted with apple trees, blocking the path of the 8 little ones. Facing the irregular and twisted rock wall of 3 meters high, 10 meters wide, and 20 centimeters wide. The 8 little ones barked excitedly. Trembling Woods acted as if he had gotten a new toy. He continued to raise rock walls, making the originally beautiful apple orchard into a mess of walls. Chapter 362. Rock Wall was not a lethal magic, but it was very useful in team battles. Whether it was blocking or defending, it was a very useful magic. Rock thorns, rock grenades, rock walls. Dosun's training had to be replanned so that it could accept new instructions. However, the top priority was not to train Dosun, but to complete the new smoke mission. Mission: news from afar is coming. No one can predict whether the shocking conspiracy will come true, but as a lord, you need to be ready for battle and wait for the moment when the news is delivered. Reward: green caterpillar reproduction. This was the content of the new mission. The reward was the inexplicable green caterpillar reproduction. He was not very clear about what a green caterpillar was. He asked many people, but they did not know what a green caterpillar was. It sounded like some kind of caterpillar, but caterpillars were basically pests. Why was it a reward? Is it a worm similar to a silkworm? The silk it spits out is green? This question could only be answered after the mission was completed. What he cared about was the content of the mission, getting ready for battle. The smoke mission did not give exact information, that is, whether the dragon slaying will happen or not, and what the result will be is still unknown. But I should determine the battle order of Flower Town to the battlefield and be ready to fight at any time. List quietly thought about his strength. He and Dosen were a pair. When he went to the battlefield, he would definitely take Dosen with him. Dosen's current strength was comparable to a newly promoted Sky Knight. He had 3 types of magic: the main attack skill, Rock Thorns, the control skill, Rock Wall, and the long-range output skill, Rock Grenades. He had no obvious shortcomings. Coupled with List's magic eyes and archery, it was definitely a super output platform. Paris should be brought to the battlefield. She did not need to fight, but only needed to be able to burst out at a critical moment to deal with a fatal crisis. The rest was the Knight Squad with 2 elite Earth Knights and 10 ordinary Earth Knights. They were not outstanding, but they should be able to take on the auxiliary work. Basically, this was the full combat power of Flower Town. In terms of equipment, the Knight Squad had a full set of fine steel knight sets, arrows made of Thorn's Ironwood and Thorn's Poison, which were not too good but not too bad either. He also had binoculars that allowed him to see ahead of time. My Knight Squad will follow Coral Island's orders of chivalry and undertake some logistical and auxiliary tasks. Once on the battlefield, I will think about what to do. The battlefield is ever-changing, and I can only adapt to the situation. I didn't expect to be on the battlefield so soon. Don't worry, Lord Baron. I will protect you well, Paris said with a smile. List smiled back. With my current strength and Dosen's, as long as we don't run into a sacred swordsman Sky Knight, we won't be in any danger. I will fight alongside my father and brother, and it will be very difficult for me to encounter a Sky Knight. If we really encounter a power we can't resist, then you can take action. He paused and said, use your transformation carefully. You still have a lot of youth to look forward to. If you can save me, then save me. If you can't, then run away first. It was impossible to judge what a person would do in the face of danger. List was just preparing for the worst. As a person living in a peaceful era, he had crossed over to this different world where the night charged. Naturally, he would be nervous about the battlefield. Or rather, without experiencing the baptism of blood and fire, he would not be able to transform his mentality and let go of his soul. Marquis Merlin had told him that young people should be hot-blooded. Unfortunately, he was not a young man, and there were few moments where he was hot-blooded. Taking all aspects into consideration was his style. Paris was a human who had faced the Light Dragon. She said lightly, as long as my life allows, I will not let Lord Baron fall into danger. There seemed to be an atmosphere brewing. They smiled at each other, and then Paris left the study. Inside the Seaview Villa, the Siren magician Ichi was still studying magic seriously. She had been completely immersed in the world of magic and could not extricate herself. Almost most of the time, she stayed in the Seaview Villa, constantly flipping through magic books, like a sponge, constantly absorbing all kinds of magic knowledge. Brother, you are here. Well, I came to see Ichi. Every time he saw Ichi, List would be in a good mood. By the way, I also came to see Nami. The mangrove sprite was sleeping on the table. She rubbed her eyes and saw List. She whispered a chirp as a greeting. Then she continued to sleep. Unlike the restless thorn sprite, Ella, most sprites actually like to be quiet and spent most of their lives sleeping. After all, they were born from plants, and plants stayed in one place all their lives. Brother, Do you want to hear Achi sing? Achi put down the magic book and asked with big eyes. Liszt naturally would not refuse. So a beautiful and melodious song sounded softly. It was a popular folk song of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. When it came out of Achi's mouth, it was no less than the sound of nature. Compared to playing the piano, it could soothe the anxiety in Liszt's heart faster and make him feel better. After the song, Liszt habitually reached out and rubbed Achi's blue hair. Achi smiled and threw herself into Liszt's arms. She liked to snuggle up in Liszt's arms. Felt very warm, even though the weather was getting hotter. Achi, I may have to go on a long trip. I hope that during my absence, you will continue to study magic hard and strive to become a great wizard as soon as possible. Where is brother going? I don't know. I may go to the battlefield, or I may not have to leave the flower town. In short, you have to study hard. Well, Achi is studying hard every day. It won't be long before Achi becomes a great wizard of water. At that time, Achi will no longer have to worry about being chased by the Gyurumita in the sea. If there are any more Gyurumita that want to eat Achi, Achi will hit them with magic. At the beginning of June, the scorching sun scorched the earth. On this day, the Coral City's harbor welcomed a three-masted sailboat flying the sapphire dragon flag. After docking, the news had already reached Tulip Castle. Count Lee William personally rushed to the harbor to welcome the sailboat representing the court. The sailboat's people had already disembarked and were waiting at the harbor. When they saw Lee William and his entourage appear, a knight dressed in silver-white armor immediately urged his horse forward. Count Lee William, I am Bosky Pansy, captain of the Blue Blood Orders of Chivalry's 7th Knight Squad. I have come bearing the decree of the Sapphire Grand Duke. Good day, Captain Bosky. What decree has the Grand Duke brought? This is the Grand Duke's personal letter. Bosky took out a letter wrapped in pitch-black leather from his bosom and solemnly handed it over to Lee William. The decree is in the letter. After receiving the letter, Lee William already had a premonition that something was about to happen. Yet he still calmly extended his hand. Captain Bosky, please follow me to Tulip Castle to rest. Chapter 363. Levis was entertaining Bosky Pansy, a viscount, an elite drug addict Earth Knight from the Pansy family. This family's fief was located in Blue Dragon Island's 7-color city, and it was also a count's family. The family's heirs were flourishing, and most of them served under the Blue Blood Orders of Chivalry. In fact, a family like the Pansy family was called the Blue Blood Alliance, meaning a family alliance vassal to the Blue Blood Orders of Chivalry. They were not a standard aristocratic lord, but rather a pioneering aristocrat. They were the Sapphire family's whip of power. They didn't have a large island as their fief, nor did they engage in production. All of their wealth came from rewards and plunder. The Blue Blood Alliance would usually marry within a small circle, and there was a great estrangement between them and the fief lords. Moreover, the non-lineal female members of the Sapphire family would usually become the mistress of the Blue Blood Alliance, helping the Sapphire family maintain control over the Blue Blood Alliance. For example, Bosky's mother, the wife of the Count of 7-Color City, was a distant niece of the Sapphire Grand Duke. Levis wanted to inquire about some information from Bosky, but he did not receive any positive response. I'm sorry, Sir Levis. I don't know what happened. I only know that the Grand Duke ordered me to bring a decree, obey Sir Count's command, and carry out the Grand Duke's next order. Of course, the Grand Duke's decree is our Tulip family's program of action. Levis had no choice but to play along. On the other side, in the study, Lee William had already opened the letter with a black cover. The Sapphire Dragon imprint was intact, indicating that it was indeed the Grand Duke's handwriting and not a fake letter. Coupled with the three-masted fast sailboat and Bosky's identity, it was enough to prove the authenticity of the information. The letter was very short. My follower, Count Lee William Tulip, the Lord of Coral Island, when you read this letter, your lord, the ruler of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, Duke Andrew Sapphire, has already overflowed with anger that must be vented through the cruelest war. My closest comrade, a partner worthy of life and death, Iron Hoof Island's Andy Sapphire, has betrayed me. He actually tried to encroach on my most glorious authority, the Sapphire Dragon. This is an unforgivable betrayal. Now, as the Lord, I order you to gather all your might and meet me at Oxhorn City on Iron Hoof Island. The wound of betrayal must be washed with blood and fire. William Lee, it's time to prove your loyalty and courage. Take this black letter and set off immediately. It's an order to encircle Iron Hoof Island. Sapphire 152, May 26th. After reading the letter, there was no expression on William Lee's face as he sat in his chair and remained motionless for a full 3 minutes. Only then did he suddenly get up, put away the black leather letter, and called the deputy butler, Silva. Inform Captain Mickey and advisor Jacob to come to my study immediately to discuss matters. Yes, master. Silva quickly left. William Lee tapped his fingers on the table as he continued to ponder. After regaining his composure, he immediately took out a pen and paper and started drafting a letter, writing down a title, Honorable Marquis Merlin Longtaro. Halfway through writing, Captain Mickey arrived. The Count stopped writing and said directly, Mickey, orders of chivalry should act. Immediately send a knight to inform List, Jonas, Trick, and the other lords to go to Tulip Castle to discuss matters. Tell them that this is a meeting of the same nature as the orders of expansion. Sir, is war coming? Yes, it is already here. I will go inform everyone. Captain Mickey went out excitedly. The Count continued to write letters until the Coral City's advisor Jacob arrived. He had just finished writing a letter. After sealing the letter, he gave it to Silva. Send it to Longtaro Castle through caravan channels. Then he said to Jacob, Inform the advisors of the major towns that this year's summer harvest will be collected ahead of schedule. We have a war to fight and need a lot of financial support and logistical support. Remember, I need you to ensure that the expedition materials arrive at the port and are loaded within 3 days. Flower Town. List had just woken up from his afternoon nap when the messenger knight from Tulip Castle arrived. Sir List, Sir Count has summoned all the lords to Tulip Castle to discuss matters. What matters are they discussing? A meeting of the nature of the orders of expansion. Orders of expansion? List raised his eyebrows and instantly understood that the news had reached the Coral Island. The dragon slaying incident had occurred. It sounded like the slaying of the dragon had failed, and the Grand Duke had issued the orders of expansion to eliminate the Bull Marquis. I see. I will go to Tulip Castle, please wait a moment. After changing into leather armor and mounting Black Dragon, List hurried to Tulip Castle. Along the way, he took a few deep breaths to calm himself down. The first time in his life on the battlefield was perhaps about to begin. However, he didn't feel the panic and uneasiness he expected. He was just a little excited. After calming himself down, he even had the leisure to call out the smoke mission. Mission completed. Reward: the reproduction of the green caterpillar. The inexplicable green caterpillar had probably been quietly breeding in Flower Town or a corner of Black Horse Island. List had no idea what it was for, but after looking at the new mission reward, the fog on his head did not dissipate. Mission. Although it is not an order to go to the mainland to plunder the resources of the Eagle Kingdom, the black letter of the Sapphire Grand Duke has the same nature. Participate in the military meeting held by the Count and fight for the desired position. Reward: the settlement of the Mallard. Participate in the meeting and fight for the position. This task was not difficult. The key was the reward of the settlement of the Mallard. What did this mean? Was the Mallard the kind of duck on Earth with a green head? This duck was going to settle in Flower Town or Black Horse Island, and then become a delicacy raised by List? Moreover, was there any connection between it and the green caterpillar? Green caterpillar. Mallard. He always felt that there was a big connection between the two. Just thinking about the reward of the green caterpillar and the mallard, List turned to think about what kind of position he wanted. If I participate in the order, it is very dangerous to go across the sea to fight on another continent. Logistics should be the best position. But this time, I am afraid it is only to encircle Iron Hoof Island. The strength of the enemy is limited. The highest fighting force of Iron Hoof Island, the perfect Sky Knight, and the great magicians proficient in various magic. and there would not be too many of them. The Count told him that among Marquis Bull and his followers, there was only one perfect Sky Knight, Marquis Bull. There were at most 2 sword saints, Amphi Sapphire, the son of Marquis Bull, and Fanzhek Topaz, the Count of Yellow Jade Island, and there were at most 3 ordinary Sky Knights. Chris also revealed that there were only 4 great magicians in the Goat Gathering: Weber Truth, Warrant Truth, Olivia Truth, and Whitsell Truth. Whitsell was the oldest great magician. He lived in seclusion and his magical strength was unfathomable. If I encounter Andy Sapphire and Whitsell Truth, Paris won't be able to stop them even if she transforms. As for the others, with Trembling Woods and Paris holding them back, it shouldn't be difficult for me to escape. But Andy and Whitsell probably won't bother me. They're not my opponents. Now, Marquis Bull and the other conspirators were probably too busy. The Grand Duke could not just summon the Coral Island to encircle Iron Hoof Island. So this time, for me, the military exploits are almost free, and I can do nothing? Liszt compared his own strength with the strength of the opponents he might encounter. His confidence soared. Chapter 364. There must be something wrong with the Grand Duke's dragon. This is Father's conjecture. He thinks that with the Grand Duke's temper, if the Sapphire Dragon is safe and sound, he will never issue an encirclement order to deal with Marquis Bull. The big guilds will directly order the Sapphire Dragon to destroy everything on Iron Hoof Island to deter the enemy. After Liszt rushed to Tulip Castle, he met his brother, Levis, who was receiving the nobles who kept coming. Levis took the opportunity to tell him what had happened. The Sapphire Grand Duke had sent a letter, summoning all his followers to gather on Iron Hoof Island to destroy Marquis Bull. Can you infer what exactly happened to the Sapphire Dragon? Liszt asked calmly. At least it's injured. The knight who came to inform was a Viscount of the Blue Blood Alliance. He was very tight-lipped and didn't get any useful information. So, Father is going to follow the original plan, listen to the Grand Duke's order and participate in the encirclement? When the situation is unclear, this is the most suitable choice. Father is already communicating with several marquises and earls. When we reach Oxhorn City, we will carefully consider the next step of action. However, the war has basically been decided. Liszt, you are only 17 years old. Do you really plan to participate in the war? He was a little upset. As the heir of the family who was called a genius since childhood, he only went to the battlefield at the age of 23, and the 17-year-old Liszt was also about to go to the battlefield. Liszt didn't know what Levis was thinking. He just said lightly, "As the second son of a noble, the only chance to change my fate is war. I don't have much time to waste." All right. The meeting was held in the evening. After the Earl of Coral Island, Lee William Tulip, announced the Grand Duke's order, he immediately began to arrange the knight candidates. Everyone will participate in the war. Bring yourselves and your followers. As long as you are not an old, weak, or disabled Earth Knight, you must appear on the battlefield. He looked around at all the nobles. My plan is to form 6 orders of chivalry, 1 elite orders of chivalry, 4 ordinary orders of chivalry, and 5 orders of chivalry to directly participate in the war. There is also 1 orders of chivalry responsible for patrolling, garrisoning, and defending Coral Island. 6 orders of chivalry, 6 commanders. Coral City's advisor, Jacob, became the commander of the orders of chivalry. He stayed behind and was responsible for Coral Island's safety. As for the remaining 5 orders of chivalry, there were already 4 commanders. Lee William naturally led the elite orders of chivalry. The 3 viscounts, Jonas, Trick, and Levis, each led 1 orders of chivalry. Now, there was only 1 orders of chivalry left. Sir Earl, please leave it to me. Without much hesitation, Liszt said directly, "Although it is my first time on the battlefield, I have an intermediate world of Warcraft as my pet. My fighting strength is comparable to an ordinary Sky Knight. I believe I can lead 1 orders of chivalry and fight for glory." Lee William immediately looked at everyone in the meeting. Is there anyone else who wants to recommend themselves for the orders of chivalry? Originally, there were indeed a few elite Earth Knights with the identity of Baron who were eager to try. However, after List recommended himself, they immediately gave up. Not to mention that List was already hailed as a future Viscount, just based on the fact that he was Lee William's son. It would be very difficult to compete with him. After all, no one would be foolish enough to think that in the eyes of the Sir Earl, their position was higher than List's, even if he was Madame Marie's brother. Madame Marie's brother was also an elite Earth Knight who inherited the title of Baron. His prestige on Coral Island was not weak. He very much wanted to fight for the position of Orders of Chivalry's commander, which was the best position to obtain military merits. However, now he could only glare at List with indignation. He no longer dared to fight for it. List would release a dog to bite him. Every time he went out, he would bring Dosen along, fearing that others wouldn't know that he had an intermediate world of Warcraft. Of course, the benefits of doing so were quite obvious. No one raised any objections in the meeting. Therefore, List smoothly became the new commander of Orders of Chivalry. Soon after, the meeting began to discuss how many Earth Knights each lord could send to participate in the war. Then, they would be assigned to the 5 Orders of Chivalry according to their subjective wishes. Obviously, the Orders of Chivalry led by List were not popular. Not many nobles were willing to join. The response was sparse. He didn't care. He didn't even care about his own knight squad. Only Dosen was his greatest reliance. In the end, the Count made a strong arrangement. Captain Loudon, you are an experienced and prudent elite Earth Knight. You will lead a knight squad and assist List in making decisions. Copperfield and Nash, you will each lead a knight squad and join List's Orders of Chivalry. Captain Loudon had always been the knight captain of Coral Island's elite Orders of Chivalry. This was tantamount to the Count directly adding a knight squad of elite Orders of Chivalry to List's Orders of Chivalry. Copperfield and Nash were veteran baron. They each had their own knight squad, and there was no lack of elite Earth Knights among their followers. In addition, because each Orders of Chivalry had 10 knight squads, there was still an extra knight squad. With a wave of his hand, the Count added List's Orders of Chivalry. As a result, List's Orders of Chivalry had 11 knight squads, a total of 142 people. The Count took a deep look at his son. List, please remember that all the glory of these knights rests on you. List calmly responded, I am with the knights. The Orders of Chivalry were uniformly distinguished by color. The Count led the Red Orders of Chivalry, Levis led the Yellow Orders of Chivalry, Jonas Gravel led the Grey Orders of Chivalry, Trick Sloppy led the Cyan Orders of Chivalry, and List led the Black Orders of Chivalry. Everything was properly discussed. The Count stood up and solemnly announced, My followers, you have 2 days to prepare. At 10 o'clock in the morning on June 7th, all Orders of Chivalry must be assembled at Coral Island's port. May the glory of the knights watch over each and every one of us, and fight side by side on the road to glory. Everyone stood up, including List, who put his right hand on his chest and solemnly saluted. We are willing to charge for Sir. At the end of the meeting, a simple dinner was eaten at Long Taro Castle. He returned to his territory that very night. Regardless of the fact that it was already 1 o'clock in the morning, List quickly summoned all the Earth Knight and town officials and began a meeting overnight. The meeting only lasted for half an hour. Everything that should be prepared had already been prepared, and now it was just a repetition. After finishing these things, he took a bath and lay in bed. The smoke mission was called. Unsurprisingly, as he won the position of Orders of Chivalry, the mission was completed. Mission completed. Reward: the settlement of the mallard duck. I don't know where the cyan caterpillar and mallard duck are. Tomorrow, send someone to look for them in Flower Town. If they can't be found, they should be on Black Horse Island. I don't have time to go to Black Horse Island to look for them. I'll leave it to Gort. Whether it's the cyan caterpillar or the mallard duck, it shouldn't be a great reward. He clenched his fist. War is my top priority now. The smoke changed, forming a new serpentine. Mission: war has come. Serving as the commander of Orders of Chivalry has paved the way for your road to glory. So please lead your Orders of Chivalry to the port of Ironhoof Island and start your war. Reward: the awakening of Virginia Truth. Virginia Truth. List remembered that he was talking about the magic goat family girl whose appearance was restored by the 36D ghost. Chapter 365. List took out the soul storage jar, tilted the teapot and poured it out. No smoke came out. Obviously, Virginia Truth had not woken up yet. List didn't think much about it and continued to sleep. The next day, all day long, he was busy preparing for the logistics to the battlefield. In addition to the night squad, List had to bring Paris, Dosen, and 8 retainer knight to serve him on the battlefield. Washing and cooking were inevitable when he went to war. These tasks could not be done by himself and could only be handed over to the retainer knight. In addition, he had to bring several town officials to perform a special task: the migration of serfs. Once Ironhoof Island was besieged, the castles would certainly fall one by one, and the serfs belonging to those castles would become the spoils of war. List was absolutely reluctant to let these serfs run away and eventually fall into the hands of the Sapphire Grand Duke, who would then be reinfeft to other nobles. He had already discussed with the Count and his brother that he would rent the family's ship and engage in serf transport. As long as there was a chance to coerce the serfs to take a ship to the harbor, he would never be polite. Black Horse Island was a large wasteland, and even Flower Town had a lot of wastelands that were not fully planted. Serfs were really scarce. These serfs were not the same as the serfs of the Eagle Kingdom. They spoke the same language and could be arranged to work directly after being captured. There was no need for running in and digestion. Remember to bring enough supplies, especially pancakes, breadsticks, and jerky. List checked the supplies on the carriage. When the Lord called on the lesser lords to participate in the battle, he would not prepare supplies for the lesser lords, but only for his own retainer knight. Marcus, Charles, and the others were called followers. In fact, they were just List's retainer knight status before they were enfeft. "Sir, we brought 1,500 pancakes, 1,000 breadsticks, and 800 jerky, enough for everyone to eat for a month," Marcus replied. Pancakes were the work of Mrs. Abbey, inspired by List. They were portable and easy to store, suitable for marching and fighting. Pancakes saved more space than the traditional breadsticks carried by the world's armies. Pancakes, breadsticks, and jerky would constitute the staple food in war. Of course, the knight didn't just eat these things. Once they conquered the next castle, they would be able to eat whatever they wanted. These pancakes, breadsticks, and jerky were more of a reserve just in case. The essence of a knight's combat was to nurture oneself through battle. After carefully checking the materials to make sure that nothing was missing, List organized his gem space again. He took out some things that he didn't need and sealed them in the castle's warehouse, such as mithril, jade, and crystal, and refilled it with food. In addition to the 6-headed king sea snake meat from before, this amount of food was enough for him to eat for a year. He definitely wouldn't starve to death. Then he went to the magic workshop in the Shiitake town, originally called the Flame Mushroom Processing Workshop. It was where Elk Sun made potions. Now, his job had been replaced by Chris, and the name of the workshop had been changed to Magic Workshop. All the potions produced in the Flower Town were processed here. "Chris, is my potion ready?" he asked. Chris moved out the prepared box. "Lord Baron, I finally made this batch of potions before you went to war, but I have to say, Mr. Elk Sun, who you worked with before, made potions in a simple and crude way, wasting too much magic power. Is his potion-making skills poor? It can't be said to be too bad. It can only be said to be relatively bad. Maybe he has very little experience in making potions and wastes at least 20% of his magic power," Chris said. She was a relatively talented magician. She was promoted at the age of 17. Elk Sun and others were promoted in their 20s. Moreover, Chris was most proficient in potion making. It was normal for her to improve the effectiveness of potions by 20%. List smiled. "Fortunately, you are helping me now. Otherwise, I would not be happy to think that a large number of my potions would be lost in the production process, and that some might be deducted. If I can break through to a great magician one day, the efficiency of making potions will continue to improve. Now, I have basically reached the saturation rate that a magician can master. Just do your best. During my absence, if you have any needs, just ask the castle. I understand, Lord Baron. All the potions were put into the gem space. Even if he went out to war, he still didn't want to interrupt his potion practice. The practice of qi was like sailing against the current. Now, with the secret technique Aura Decay, the effect of the potions would be greatly improved. It would not be difficult to break Merlin Longtaro's record of 22 years old Sky Knight. Maybe I can become a Sky Knight at the age of 18 and ride a dragon at the age of 20. Liszt was ambitious. In the evening, he went to the Seascape Villa again to say goodbye to Achi. However, he unexpectedly got news from Achi about the caterpillar and the mallard. Brother, there are a group of ducks and caterpillars in Nami's house. Ducks and caterpillars? What do they look like? The caterpillar is a bit like a baby sprite worm. It is as long as a finger and has fluffy hair. It is not the hair of a worm, but the hair of an animal. The duck has a gray body and a green head. It is as big as a swan and can spit out water arrows. They are low-level World of Warcraft and they like to eat caterpillars the most. Obviously, the reward of the smoke mission fell on Mangrove Island. The caterpillar reproduced on Mangrove Island, which attracted the low-level World of Warcraft mallard ducks that fed on the caterpillar. It was not clear what the use of the caterpillar was. Maybe its green hair could be made into clothing like animal fur, but the World of Warcraft mallard ducks were definitely an excellent source of food. Liszt's eyes lit up. With his current archery, hunting low-level World of Warcraft was a piece of cake. At this time, Achi said, "Brother, those ducks like to lay eggs everywhere. There have been a lot of duck eggs on the island. They never seem to hatch eggs. I haven't seen a single duckling." Duck eggs? World of Warcraft mallard ducks lay eggs on the island. This meant that if picked up, the mallard could be hatched directly and then raised by hand. Just like the low-level World of Warcraft fire rabbits raised in Tulip Castle for food, it could meet the castle's large demand for World of Warcraft meat. Even if they could not hatch, the duck eggs were definitely a delicious dish. He thought for a moment and said, "Achi, can you and Nami collect these duck eggs and put them in the Seaview Villa? Forget it, don't collect them. Wait until I come back." It was summer now, and these duck eggs could not be stored for a long time. By the time he returned from Ironhoof Island, they would have already gone bad. It was better to let the mallard ducks breed on the island on their own. In case these duck eggs did not need to be hatched and the ducklings would automatically break out of their shells, wouldn't that increase the number of mallards? When he left the Seaview Villa, Liszt was in a good mood. Now that there were blizzard beasts, mallards, and black pearl clams that were not sea monsters in his territory, he had mastered 3 specialties related to World of Warcraft. Chapter 366. The time before dawn was the darkest moment of the day. However, the flower town was brightly lit. The torches were lit in clusters, and the crystal lights in the castle made the atmosphere particularly lively. "Thomas, hurry up. The Lord is already washing up. The ironed underclothes need to be delivered to the Lord before 4 o'clock. Have Dosen been fed with food and water? Tom, don't forget the Lord's instructions. Help Dosen take a bath and comb its fur. Mrs. Morrison, have the maids sifted through the dry milk powder? We have to pack it up and load it onto the carriages as soon as possible. Barton, hurry up and feed all the horses for the expedition. Don't delay the team's departure." The butler Carter constantly walked back and forth between the castle and the apple orchard, directing the castle's servants to act in order to serve the troops that were about to set out. When Liszt finished washing up and walked into the dining hall, Marcus, Paris, and the others had already arrived and were waiting for breakfast. After taking the seat of honor, the serving men immediately laid out the napkins. He smiled and greeted everyone. "Good morning, everyone." "Good morning, sir." The breakfast was exceptionally sumptuous. Under the illumination of the crystal lights and candlelight, the dazzling array of dishes was comparable to a festive dinner. There was even a lot of World of Warcraft meat. After cutting a piece of steak and taking a sip of milk tea, Liszt said, "This is our last meal in the castle. Next, I need you to quickly enter a state of war. The distance between the Ironhoof Island and the Coral Island is a 4-day voyage. The round trip will take 8 days. In addition to the battle on the island, we won't be able to return for at least half a month. Are you ready? Sir, we are always looking forward to going to the battlefield. A knight's mission is to live for the battlefield. Marcus had been in a state of excitement these past few days. He had participated in the war. As an elite Earth Knight, he had experience in several pioneering orders, yet he had not made much of a difference. However, he was also a commoner who was very keen on aristocracy. He almost dreamed of going to the battlefield to obtain military exploits and be promoted to an aristocrat. Now, an opportunity had appeared before him. I'm always looking forward to going on the battlefield again to prove myself. Charles Trapp's eyes were burning. I'm no longer young. These few years are my last chance. List's classmate, Rick Footprint, said, although this is my first time on the battlefield, ever since I was young, my only goal in life has been war. Griffin Haystack grinned. My lord, Griffin has always wanted to go to the battlefield and kill people. David Yellowteeth, who had only recently followed him, had a solemn expression. I really didn't expect to have such a lucky opportunity. The Flower Town is indeed a place blessed by the glory of the night. I will definitely strive for glory for Sir. After Marcus, the other knight also expressed their passion. Only Paris was focused on eating and drinking. She did not say anything. She was not a knight, nor did she have any desire for nobility. Hearing the lofty aspirations of his followers, List's blood began to boil. He hurriedly finished his breakfast, wiped his mouth and stood up. Whether they had eaten or not, the knight put down the cutlery in their hands and stood up. List looked around. He wanted to say something to boost morale, but after thinking for a while, he felt that it was too cliché. Moreover, in Tulip Castle, he had watched the Count show off his might while he flattered him. He knew very well that this kind of scene had happened too often and had lost its significance. Moreover, there was no need for him to be excited, as the knight was already excited enough. Therefore, he just said in a deep voice, "Go to battle!" Immediately after, he turned around and left the dining hall. He took the red blood sword handed to him by the serving man and strode out of the castle. Outside, the sky was still dark. Torches were distributed on both sides of Dawson Avenue, illuminating the path. The retainer knight pulled Black Dragon over, and List directly mounted it. The other knight, as well as Paris, also mounted their horses one after another. Together with the 2 carriages transporting supplies and Dawson following the team, the expedition team was ready. The fief's officials and castle servants stood guard on both sides of Dawson Avenue, saluting with their gazes. Even more fief's residents got up early and stood guard on both sides of the main road, looking at the majestic knight squad clad in fine steel armor with envy and worship in their eyes. No one made any noise, yet the atmosphere was already warm. List didn't say any pleasantries. He lightly kicked Black Dragon's belly and led the team forward slowly. Behind him, Gort shouted, "May the knight be blessed with glory and Sir Lord return in triumph." The others followed suit. "May the knight be blessed with glory and Sir Lord return in triumph." Gradually, they converged into a wave of shouts, each louder than the last. Their shouts resounded throughout the Flower Town. "May the knight be blessed with glory and Sir Lord return in triumph." Amid the loud shouts, the Silver Knight rode faster and faster, disappearing at the end of the dewy road in a short time. Only when the knight was no longer in sight did the shouting crowd disperse under the reprimand of the fief's officials. Those who should go back to sleep went back to sleep, while those who should make preparations went back to work. The lord and the knight went to war, but the officials did not. The serfs still had to work. Soon. The originally lively castle gradually regained its silence, with only a few crystal lamps still vaguely lit, their light piercing the darkness before dawn. The butler Carter stood on the extinguished Dawson Avenue, staring at the dark road for a long time without turning around. Mrs. Morrison came over. "Mr. Carter, breakfast is ready. Everyone is waiting for you." "Oh, okay. Are you nervous?" "No, I am looking forward to it." Carter smiled. Although I am not a knight, but with master's strength, there is no need for us to worry about him. There is also Dosen, it is full of magic in World of Warcraft. Mrs. Morrison, I have seen too many knights glory in the Flower Town. Some people are born aristocrats. Mrs. Mawson nodded. Yes, master. You know that I have not worked in the Tulip Castle, and have rarely seen master until the Count appointed me to be master's butler. When I tasted my first glass of wine with master in the study, I understood that master is a noble-born aristocrat. Carter recalled the time when he first came to the Flower Town. At that time, he had to calculate every day whether there was enough food in the castle to eat. Then List told him that everything would be fine. There was no discouragement, no frustration, no anxiety in that tone. It was calm as if there was nothing to worry about. And this was indeed the case. Since then, the Flower Town had developed rapidly, and there was no longer any worry about food. On the contrary, Carter was more worried about how to change the taste every day to satisfy master's appetite. There were too many varieties of the castle's menu, which was a bit confusing. Let us send our blessings to master and his followers. Carter sat down and said. Chapter 367. Under the stars and the moon, chasing after the morning dew, the white of the eastern sky gradually turned into a red glow. When the red sun rose from the eastern skyline, the team had already arrived at the Coral City's port. Many knight and knight's retainers had already gathered at the port. Captain Lawton, I'll leave the black orders of chivalry to you to assemble the team. After seeing Lawton Kettle, List directly pushed the task of assembling the team to him. List went to negotiate with Levis about the ships assigned to him. The Tulip family had about 50 ships, half of which were brig cargo ships, 2/3 of the remaining were ordinary brig ships, and 1/3 were brig fast ships. There were only 2 three-masted ships. One was the Tulip, which was a 3-masted ordinary brig, and the other was the Coral, which was a 3-masted cargo ship. The 3-masted ships certainly couldn't be assigned to List. He was assigned 1 brig fast ship, 2 ordinary brig ships, and 1 brig cargo ship. The cargo ship was used to transport food and water, the ordinary ship was used to carry the retainer knight and horses, and the fast ship was used by the aristocrats. Of course, List had special privileges. His knight squad and retainer knight also sat on the fast ship, serving him. Even Black Dragon was placed on the ship. Paris lived next door and Dosen guarded the door. Personal security was at the highest level. By the time he and Levis finished discussing which 4 ships belonged to the Black Orders of Chivalry, Count Knight had already rushed over. After giving a speech at the port, he took the lead in boarding the 3-masted ship Tulip. Soon after, one ship after another left the port. As the sun rose from the east, the Coral Islands Orders of Chivalry set sail for the Iron Hoof Island. The voyage was boring. However, this time List was a bit busy. Because he had to reorganize the Orders of Chivalry, he was constantly assembling the 142 Black Orders of Chivalry's knight on the ship. There was no way for them to train and charge together, but it was still possible for them to establish simple trust by making certain hand gestures and slogans on the battlefield. At the same time, it was also the time to establish his authority. Other than him as a baron, there were also 2 veteran Baron Copal and Nash on the ship. After a simple sword battle on the deck, both of them had to admit that, even without Dosen's intermediate World of Warcraft, they were no match for List. He couldn't even beat List in a 1v2. Leader, are you sure you didn't become an elite Earth Knight? Copal asked in dismay after suffering a crushing defeat in a 2-on-1 fight. List smiled faintly, neither denying nor admitting. The combat power of a knight is not entirely dependent on the level of combat aura. All you need to know is that my strength is enough to take on the responsibility of a commander. Charge with me. The glory of the battlefield belongs to our knight spear. He had already started cultivating the aura attenuation. However, he had not yet succeeded in cultivating it, and the effects had not yet manifested. The chi in his body was still constantly being emitted. Before he had this chi secret skill, he felt that this waste was a matter of course. But now that he had this chi secret skill, he felt very upset when he saw the chi being emitted. This was not a waste of chi, but a waste of his strength, a waste of his gold coins. Koppel was convinced. Of course, I would never doubt it now. Nash also replied, Sir Leader is powerful, and I am even more confident in seizing glory. I will definitely follow Sir closely. Status and strength were all suppressed. No one dared to disobey Liszt in the Black Orders of Chivalry. Therefore, during the short 4-day voyage, he had successfully grasped the authority of the entire Orders of Chivalry. There were no more doubts. Without encountering storms or sea monsters, the Coral Islands expedition fleet smoothly arrived at the Oxhorn City's port, which had been replaced with the Sapphire Dragon flag. The Vanguard Knight Squad landed at the port. After a simple probe, it was determined that this place was indeed occupied by the Grand Duke's Orders of Chivalry. Thereupon, the Tulip issued a flag signal, and all the ships began to dock one after another. The 5 Orders of Chivalry quickly assembled at the port. Liszt wore fine steel armor, a fine steel round shield in his left hand, a fine steel knight spear in his right hand, and the red blood sword hanging from his waist. The lining of the armor was a snakeskin soft armor made from the 6-headed sea serpent king, which had extreme defensive power. Riding on Black Dragon, man and horse became one. His imposing manner was natural. He urged his horse to circle around the assembled Black Orders of Chivalry. His expression was solemn under his mask, and his sapphire pupils glistened under the illumination of the torches. After confirming that all the knight had found their positions, he suddenly put his mask on his helmet and shouted, Everyone, close your masks and follow me. Crack, crack, crack. Following the crisp sound of metal buckling, the neatly lined up 140 knight quickly closed their masks and shrouded their whole bodies in their armor. Following Liszt, they moved from the port to Oxhorn City. Oxhorn City was a large city of Iron Hoof Island and one of the most famous cities in the entire Grand Duchy of Sapphire. Its fame originated from the Oxhorn Academy at the edge of the city. This academy provided servants to the court all year round. At the same time, many socialites from aristocratic families came here to learn needlework. Because of this, a large number of single aristocrats would stay in Oxhorn City in order to hook up with a socialite from the academy. However, in this formerly bustling Oxhorn City, there were no longer any irrelevant personnel. Only neatly dressed knight could be seen shuttling through the streets. The knight stationed in Oxhorn City, after contacting the Count, arranged for the Coral Islands Orders of Chivalry to live on a civilian street in Oxhorn City. Captain Liszt, Sir Count has informed you that after you set up camp, you are to go to Oxhorn Castle with the other captains to participate in the welcoming banquet. A knight came to deliver a message. Got it. He immediately called for Captain Loudon. Arranged the accommodations for each knight. Loudon didn't feel disgusted by Liszt's attitude. On the contrary, Loudon enjoyed this temporary authority, berating loudly for arranging the accommodations for the knight. Liszt ordered his retainer knight. My room must be cleaned. Get water to wash the floor, tables, and chairs. Scatter more tulip flowers to get rid of this disgusting stench. Accustomed to the fragrant air of the flower town, it was very difficult for him to bear the smell of feces and urine in the stinky city. Next to him, Paris coughed. Liszt said casually, By the way, also clean guard Paris's room and scatter dried tulips. Paris gave a slight salute. Many thanks, Sir Baron. There was a smile on her face. Paris will go with me to the banquet and protect my safety. Xavier is in charge of leading Dosen. Philip is in charge of looking after the horses. Liszt made some simple arrangements. After leaving the Black Orders of Chivalry's garrison area, they headed towards the Yellow Orders of Chivalry's garrison area. It just so happened that Levis had also arranged for his knight to set off with a few retainers. After waiting for the 2 Viscounts Jonas and Trick, the 4 Orders of Chivalry rushed to Oxhorn Castle. Chapter 368. The Sapphire Grand Duke was not in Oxhorn City. In fact, the Grand Duke did not leave Blue Dragon Island. It was his eldest son, Anthony Sapphire, who came to lead the siege of Iron Hoof Island. This 32-year-old heir of the Grand Duchy had reached the level of Sacred Swordsman, Sky Knight, and gradually replaced the Grand Duke in charge of the Blue Blood Orders of Chivalry. If nothing unexpected happened, he would be the 6th Grand Duke. But now it was hard to say. Something unexpected had happened. He was stationed in Oxhorn City, the largest coastal city in the southwest of Iron Hoof Island. The port of Oxhorn City is the last port of call for the expansion order every year. Not only do we have to prevent Marquis Bull from escaping from Oxhorn City, but we also have to prevent the Eagle Kingdom from intervening. Therefore, the first prince needs to personally oversee it. After socializing in Oxhorn Castle, Levis returned to his seat. Iron Hoof Island was known as the barrier of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. It was the largest island closest to the mainland. It was only a 6-day voyage from Iron Hoof Island to the coastline of the Eagle Kingdom. Iron Hoof Island was the closest port to the mainland. The fleet of the expansion order would replenish their supplies here before heading to the mainland. Because of this island was in theft to a branch of the Sapphire family. It had always been under the control of the Bull family. Unfortunately, it was the most trusted Bull family that had betrayed the Sapphire family. The leader was the closest companion and comrade of the current Grand Duke, Andy Sapphire. List did not walk back and forth. He was not very keen on socializing. Moreover, as a follower of the Earl of Coral Island, he was not suitable to socialize with the nobles of the outer islands. So, who is overseeing Oxhorn City? It's Marquis Grindenton. Levis's expression was not very good. The chief of the Blue Blood Alliance, the deputy commander of the Blue Blood Orders of Chivalry, and the father-in-law of the first princess. Grindenton Red Maple, one of the 7 marquises of the Grand Duchy. His territory was Red Maple City. The Maple family was one of the 2 marquis families in the Blue Blood Alliance. The eldest daughter of the Grand Duke, Princess Annie Sapphire, was married to Glyn Denton's son, the future Marquis of Maple City. Levis glanced at the arrogant young man who was surrounded by people in the hall. Do you see that? That's Grindenton's son, an ordinary Sky Knight who relied on his family and magic potions. Look at how proud he is, as if he's the next Dragon Knight. His tone was indignant. Clearly, Levis's interaction with the other party wasn't that pleasant. The relationship between the Blue Blood Alliance and the feudal lords had never been friendly. This was because even a marquis in the Blue Blood Alliance would only have one city. Even a viscount would have an island or a city. One was attached to the Sapphire family, equivalent to a servant relying on plundering and bestowing wealth. The other was following the Sapphire family, equivalent to a minister, equivalent to a small king in his own territory. They just couldn't get along. Fortunately, the aristocratic knight of the Blue Blood Alliance didn't give Levis much face, but the aristocratic knight of the feudal lords frequently greeted Levis. Even List received a lot of greetings. After a moment, List saw the count's figure, slightly behind an old man and a middle-aged aristocrat. He understood that the old aristocrat should be the Marquis of Deep Throat Island Wallace Pineapple Green. The middle-aged aristocrat should be the Marquis of Maple City Glyn Denton Maple Leaf. In addition, there were a few other aristocrats walking side by side with the count. They should all be aristocrats with the title of count. This group of aristocrats entered the hall. The knight who had been chatting enthusiastically returned to their seats, instantly quieting down. Glyn Denton walked to the front of the main seat, dressed in bright silver armor with very deep magic lines, making him look especially serious. Tonight is the welcoming banquet for the Earl of Coral Island, Lee William Tulip. With the arrival of Earl Lee William, the Oxhorn City's fighting order has been assembled. Next is the beginning of the war. He paused. He continued, tonight's banquet is over. Starting tomorrow, all orders of chivalry will be assigned to their respective offensive directions. Once the troops of the other ports have assembled, they will launch an attack together to sweep the Iron Hoof Island. We must vent the Grand Duke's anger and annihilate the entire Bull family. In addition, everyone should pay attention to the prohibition of private trafficking of all spoils of war on the Iron Hoof Island. These are the internal resources of the state and must be personally distributed by the Grand Duke. If anyone breaks the rules, then don't blame me for drinking his blood with the sword in my hand. After Glyn Denton finished speaking, He waited for everyone to digest his words before continuing. Then, let the banquet begin. Sitting in his seat, List was very upset. He had made ample preparations to transport a batch of serfs back to the flower town. He didn't expect that his plan to plunder serfs would be blocked before the war even started. This made him dissatisfied with the Sapphire Grand Duke. He wanted the horse to run, but he also wanted the horse to not eat grass. In addition, the dishes served were not to his liking, so after the banquet, he was not happy at all. His enthusiasm for the war also quickly cooled down. Now the only reason to support him was to make meritorious deeds, to implement the title of Viscount of Black Horse Island as soon as possible. After the banquet, everyone returned to the station. The Count summoned List and others to a room and held a simple meeting. Glyn Denton is known for its iron blood. You have to restrain your acts of private plunder. There will be spoils of war. When the war is over, you will get your share, so don't slack off. Jonas asked, Count, I still don't know what's going on with the current situation. Not to mention Yuna's list was also unclear. He only knew that the Grand Duke issued an order to encircle and suppress. So the Knight of Coral Island hurried to Oxhorn City to gather. The Count deliberated for a moment and said, judging from the information revealed by Glyn Denton, the Sapphire Dragon is injured and temporarily unable to move. The Grand Duke is healing the Sapphire Dragon. After Marquis Bull and his party launched the attack, they escaped from Blue Dragon Island and retreated back to Iron Hoof Island. The situation was a bit puzzling, and the Count could only briefly figure out a clue. So what we have to do now is to listen to the command and sweep Iron Hoof Island. I believe the situation will soon become clear. Although they still couldn't figure it out, everyone calmed down a little. At least they knew that the Sapphire Dragon was not dead, indicating that the Grand Duchy of Sapphire could not be shaken for the time being. They should continue to encircle Iron Hoof Island. There was no need to think too much. However, just as everyone was full of confidence and thinking about how to crush Iron Hoof Island, there was suddenly bad news. The second prince, Angus Sapphire, stationed in another port city, Oxhorn City, was ambushed by Marquis Bull's elite orders of chivalry because he rashly attacked. 300 knights of the Blue Blood Orders of Chivalry plus 800 fiefdom knights were completely wiped out. Only Angus, under the desperate protection of his guards, managed to escape back to Oxhorn City. The Orders of Chivalry of Wrath directly under Marquis Bull are attacking Oxhorn City, preparing to break out from there. The Grand Prince has issued an urgent secret order to transfer the garrisons of various cities to support Oxhorn City. Chapter 369. This chapter is Torment on the Path of Redemption, worth 40,000 coins. There are 3 more chapters to follow. In this strange world, a knight's mount was not only a horse. Especially after becoming a Sky Knight, a horse could no longer bind them. As a result, all kinds of World of Warcraft entered the eyes of the Sky Knight. Compared to wild beasts, World of Warcraft was relatively more intelligent, had a great possibility of taming, and knew how to submit to the strong. When the Count came to Coral Island, he was moved by the intermediate World of Warcraft barbarian bear living on the island. He wanted to tame the barbarian bear as his mount, but of course he failed in the end. The barbarian bear did not become a mount, but a seat. Since then, the Count had been searching for a World of Warcraft mount, but there was no suitable World of Warcraft to his eyes, so he became a Sky Knight without a World of Warcraft mount. And his son, List, already had a World of Warcraft mount. Not only 1, but also 9 intermediate World of Warcraft mounts. Of course, outsiders did not know that the 8 small ones were all intermediate World of Warcraft. Even if List renamed them Blizzard Beasts, many people still thought that Dosen was the unique intermediate World of Warcraft. And the 8 small ones were just low-level World of Warcraft bloodlines mixed with some intermediate World of Warcraft. After all, they did not have the hint of the smoke quest. The messenger Sky Knight in front of them came down from the back of the huge Ash Eagle. The silver-white mithril armor showed his status, Ash Eagle Orders of Chivalry. Ash Eagle was a bird domesticated by the Sapphire family in World of Warcraft. The big guild selected the outstanding knight of the Blue Blood Alliance, gave Ash Eagle mounts, and organized them into orders of chivalry. In theory, this orders of chivalry was more sophisticated and powerful than the blue blood orders of chivalry, but because of the number limit, it had never been full. At its peak, there were only 40 people. The current Ash Eagle orders of chivalry only had 25 members. This is Boteng Pansy, Bosky Pansy's father, the Count of Rainbow City, Ash Eagle orders of chivalry's captain, Ash Eagle. Levis stood next to List and introduced him in a low voice. There were 25 members of the Marsh Eagle Knighthood. Excluding the captain, there were 2 squads of knights. One was called Grey Eagle and the other was called Marsh Eagle. The news brought by Boteng forced Grydenton to make a decision. Marquis Wallace, I hope you can lead your knights to Oxhoof City to support the second prince. Marquis Wallace said, Then I'll leave Oxhorn City to you. Don't worry, since the traitor Andy's direct knights are already heading to Oxhoof City. We'll quickly take over the area around Oxhorn City. Don't worry. Since the rebel Andy's orders of chivalry are heading to Oxhorn City, we will quickly take over Oxhorn City. Marquis Grindenton frowned even more. Counts, take a look at this map. Each of you will choose a direction and complete the cleanup. The huge map was spread out. It was a bit abstract, but it was accurate to the towns under each city. List and the others could only watch from the side. Soon, Count Lee William chose a large city as his main target, Oxhair City. Oxhair City was the fief of a Count, Sneyd Parsley. Back at the camp, Lee William immediately held an internal meeting. Sneyd only has 3 small cities besides Oxhair City. His strength is only at the level of an ordinary Sky Knight. I will lead the Red Orders of Chivalry to contain Sneyd and the Parsley Castle Knight. You will quickly complete the cleanup of the 3 small cities and attack Parsley Castle with me. After thinking for a moment, he made another arrangement. Yunus will go to Little River City, Trick will go to Treeshade City, List will go to Bristle City, and Levis will be responsible for roaming support. If there is no problem, organize the equipment now. When the other earls and I find out the defenses of the rebels and confirm the attack schedule, we will directly advance into Oxhair City. There was no need for too many tactical arrangements. The battle in this world was decided by the charge of the knight. At most, there were ambushes and counter-ambushes, so it was very easy to find out information. It didn't take long before the war started. According to the established plan, List led the Black Orders of Chivalry to Oxhair City with the Count. When they arrived at the border of the territory, the Count rode to List's side. He first ordered Leiden, "Protect List," Leiden solemnly replied. "I am willing to use my body as Baron List's shield, my lord." The Count nodded in greeting, then looked at List with a complicated expression. There was worry, gratification, but in the end, he just calmly said, "Fight alone. Be careful." List calmly took a breath. Victory is at hand. Without too many emotional words, the Count waved his hand, and the 5 orders of chivalry immediately dispersed. List lightly kicked the horse's belly, and Black Dragon sprang out like an arrow, leading the Black Orders of Chivalry towards Main City. More than 140 Earth Knight, plus more than 30 Retainer Knight, a total of 180 horses trampled the earth under the scorching sun. Knight, armor, and horse, the weight added up was like a tank. The raised dust filled the air into a haze that took a long time to calm down. Main City's terrain is relatively open, and there is no Viscount Lord, so it won't be difficult to sweep. We will start sweeping from Haytown and push all the way to occupy Main City. After strangling all the night, we will finally break through the whole city and meet up with the Count at Castle Parsley. List led the Black Orders of Chivalry forward. While replenishing water, he discussed the battle strategy with Leiden, Coppearl, Nash, Marcus, and the others. "I'm afraid the knight of the small town has already heard the news and is hiding in Main City to guard it." "That's just right. Let's get rid of them all in Main City." List urged his horse to gallop. He had already concealed his excitement for the upcoming battle and replaced it with calmness. In the entire Oxhair City and the 3 small cities under its jurisdiction, there was only one ordinary Sky Knight, Sneyd. When this Sky Knight was targeted by Lee William, Oxhair City no longer had the existence of a knight capable of contending against Dosen. Even if Sneyd resorted to the strategy of luring the tiger away from the mountain and ambushing List, Paris and Dosen would join forces to stop him. Therefore, he had nothing to fear. Of course, caution was essential. Along the way, he would take out his binoculars from time to time and carefully observe the surroundings. Their route deviated from the woodlands as much as possible and went through open areas. The galloping orders of chivalry could reach a speed of 40 kilometers per hour. The whole army set off in the morning and separated from the orders of chivalry at noon. Before 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the black orders of chivalry had arrived at their target, Hay Town. Seeing a group of unfamiliar knight rushing towards the town, all the serfs in the town threw away their hoes and bone shovels in panic and hid in their shabby thatched houses, not daring to show their faces. List ordered, "Marcus, lead a team to the town and find the local officials to inquire about the situation." Marcus received the order and returned in less than 10 minutes. "Sir, I've already inquired about it. There are no feudal nobles in Hay Town. The nearest feudal nobles are in Wild Boar Town 10 kilometers away, which is the fief of a baron. 10 kilometers, no more than 10 or 20 minutes of travel. Let's go to Wild Boar Town." Black orders of chivalry did not stop at all and continued to rush to the next town. 15 minutes later, the horse stepped into Wild Boar Town. However, under the light of the setting sun, the town was very quiet and did not encounter any resistance. After capturing a few townspeople and interrogating them, the situation became clear. 10 days ago, the Baron of Wild Boar Town had already packed up his belongings and fled from his shabby little castle, leaving not even a single servant behind. Chapter 370. This chapter is Kazanwaro 10,000 Rewards. In front of an empty, dilapidated castle, there was only one serf responsible for looking after the castle. Trembling with fear, he replied, Sir, all the nobles of Main City have gathered in Main City. It was an order from the Count of Castle Vanilla. The castle's butler gave me 10 copper coins to look after the castle and make sure no one steals the flowers in the garden." After listening to the serf's words, List frowned in deep thought. Sure enough, knowing that the army is approaching, all the nobles have begun to band together to resist. Apart from Main City, I'm afraid there are only a few knight in this area. He quickly made a decision. The closest town to Main City is Honey Town, about 20 kilometers away. We can arrive in half an hour. Let's set up camp in Honey Town. Sir, aren't we too close to Main City? Leiden reminded. Stay alert at night. I hope they will abandon the city and take the initiative to launch a sneak attack on me. If not, after a night's rest, we will directly attack the city. With Dosen around, their castle won't last long. Tear down the castle, destroy the knight of Main City, and quickly move in. Dosen's Rockthorn was the fastest magic to tear down a castle, unless the castle had anti-magic materials. After destroying the knight of Main City, they would cooperate with the Count to destroy Sneyd's Castle Vanilla, and then they could quickly advance to the next big city. Ironhoof Island had a total of 11 big cities. The 3 port cities, Oxhoof City, Oxhorn City, and Oxhair City had already been occupied. Ironhoof City, where Marquis Bull was located, was easy to defend and difficult to attack. However, there were still 6 big cities left. Capturing each one was a huge battle. In fact, destroying Ironhoof Island was not difficult. Marquis Bull could attack and injure the Sapphire Dragon, but that was more than 30 years of preparation, and no matter how strong he was only a marquis. His strength was limited. Now the Grand Duke had gathered all his followers from the major ports to encircle them. Without outside interference, this battle was a great opportunity to seize credit. Moreover, Marquis Bull's direct subordinate, Orders of Chivalry, Wrathful Orders of Chivalry, had already gone to fight against the Second Prince. The area around Oxhorn City was, in theory, an abandoned battlefield. If they didn't seize the credit now, when would they? The only ones we have to be careful of are the sorcerers of the Goat Gathering. The Bull Marquis has a deep connection with the evil sorcerers of the Goat Gathering. However, the nobles who follow him may not have anything to do with the sorcerers. After List stated his decision, he let the others discuss it for a while. In the end, they still followed his decision and quickly rushed to Honeytown. Honeytown was only 2 kilometers away from Main City. It was a distance that could be covered in a single charge. When the red glow of dusk filled the western sky, the Black Orders of Chivalry had already blocked the main road out of Honeytown. There was no night in the town. List directly ordered, "Start the cleanup. Drive the serfs away, but don't kill them at will." In any case, he was the soul of a modern person, and he was far from being indifferent to life. Selling serfs was already the worst crime he could do to the commoners. "Yes, sir." The Black Orders of Chivalry quickly cleaned up the serfs in the town, drove them out of the castle, and then began to set up camp around the castle. Of course, some serfs were driven over to help the knight complete the work of fixing tents, gathering firewood, carrying water, digging soil, and so on. The knight searched the town inside and outside. When they returned, the camp was already set up. "Sir, there should be a lot of rats among the serfs that Main City uses to gather information. Unfortunately, we only caught 2. Their kind should have already brought the news of our arrival to Main City." Captain Leiden reported. "It doesn't matter. I originally intended to let the people of Main City know the news. Tonight, they will either be on tenterhooks and unable to sleep well, or they will arrange a sneak attack. In any case, the outcome of the battlefield cannot be changed. We came here to conquer and encircle." After saying these harsh words, List said, "Bring the 2 rats over." The rats were quickly brought over. They had already suffered physical pain, so they had no backbone. They directly poured out what they knew. "Honorable Sir Knight, there are nearly 130 Earth Knights in Main City. The strongest is Baron Murray. The elite Earth Knights are all stationed in the castle." Another rat rushed to say, "The castle is on a hillside, easy to defend and difficult to attack. Moreover, there is plenty of water and food. Right now, Baron Murray and the others are still building the rock walls, preparing to defend the castle to the death. They may not intend to attack." "Why don't they intend to attack or escape, but choose to defend to the death?" List asked. "Maybe they don't dare to leave the territory without permission. Once they leave, it is tantamount to running away, and they will be punished more severely." The previous rat replied. But the other one shook his head and said loudly, "Honorable Sir Knight, Parker is willing to exchange a big secret for my freedom. Tell me, if it is really a big secret, I don't mind letting you go." List gave Marcus a look, and the Earth Knight dragged the previous rat away. Parker was immediately relieved. "Here's the thing. I have a brother who is a rat in Oxhair City, and he has a relationship with Trish, the maid of Caraway Castle. Once, when they were doing something good in the warehouse, they overheard a magician coming to Caraway Castle and discussing something with the Earl in secret. The magician told Earl Snade that Marquis Bull needed him to defend the castle and delay the army's attack. He also promised that if the matter was successful, he would be conferred the title of a new marquis. Even if Snade unfortunately died in the battle, his son would inherit the title of marquis. The Earl's son served under the Orders of Chivalry of Wrath. Those were the Duke's Orders of Chivalry, so the Earl quickly agreed to the magician to defend Caraway Castle. Parker said in full detail, "Did they say what would happen after the matter was successful?" "I don't know, Sir Knight. I have already told them everything I know. These are all the news my brother bragged to me after drinking. He said that he and Trish had a relationship, which was tantamount to sleeping with the maid of the future marquis." After Parker finished, he could not help but ask, "Sir Knight, you promised to give me freedom. I promised to leave Main City without looking back. Of course, I will give you freedom now. Marcus, take him out," List said, giving Marcus a knowing look. After a while, Marcus brought another rat over and said, "Sir, Parker has obtained complete freedom." He deliberately emphasized the word freedom. In this world, there would be many restrictions at any time and any place. List looked at the rat. "Your partner Parker has exchanged a secret for his freedom. What about you? If you have a secret of sufficient value, you can also obtain freedom." The rat stammered, "Sir Knight, right, I know I have a secret." "What secret?" "It is a sprite worm. The barley worm is being bred in the barley field belonging to Baron Murray outside Main City. Baron Murray has no way to move it away and can only raise it outside. But, it has already been a few days. I don't know if the barley worm has been bred or not. A barley worm being bred. Chapter 371. He was not in a hurry to check whether the barley worms in the barley fields had been bred or not. List chose to stay in the honey town and rest for the night before attacking the castle the next day. Don't forget to strengthen the vigilance. Laden, divide the Black Orders of Chivalry into 3 groups. Each group will take turns to keep watch for 4 hours. Marcus, lead the night squad to inspect the obstacles again. Unlike other night squads, the Flower Town's night squads not only had to learn how to charge, but also had to learn how to trap, sail, foreign languages, and other knowledge. In fact, List had the idea of training his night squad into a special force. Laden organized the night and the night squads to keep watch, while Marcus led people to check the security system. During a break, Paris suddenly came over. Sir Baron, I am going to the main city's castle to investigate and find out what's going on inside the castle. As a light dragon's black dragon gang, she could use the ability of light and shadow to become invisible, which was an excellent reconnaissance skill. List was certainly willing to take her to the castle. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. However, he did not immediately agree. The main city's castle must have received news of our attack and will be strictly guarded. Wouldn't it be too dangerous for you to investigate? Please believe in my skills. As long as they don't have the ability to see like Sir Baron, no one will be able to discover me. Even if they discover me, they won't be able to keep me. I will be back soon. If it's convenient, I can kill the few night leaders. This was not boasting Paris had such an ability. However, List shook his head. The main city's strength is not strong, so there is no need for you to take action. Just carefully investigate. By all means, don't put yourself in danger. I don't want anything to happen to you. Saying that, he patted Paris on the shoulder. Paris immediately blushed. I understand. List's lips curled into a beautiful arc as he said calmly. Besides, I need to practice with the Knight of Main City. This is my first time leading the Orders of Chivalry into battle. It won't be easy to find a suitable whetstone. Yes. Paris raised her head and looked at List. Lord Baron, I'll be back soon. After saying that, her figure had already disappeared from his field of vision. The sound of her footsteps spread into the distance, finally escaping into the darkness, and could no longer be seen. List was left standing on the spot, deep in thought. I've only used the skin of the 6-headed king sea serpent to make 1 leather armor for myself. I still have a lot of snake skin left. I should make one for Paris. Also, I need to find a chance to make mithril armor for my night squad. It's a pity that I don't have a blacksmith who can forge mithril. Mithril was a magical metal, so the forging process was very strict. Ordinary blacksmiths would not be able to do it. Immediately after, he summoned the Smoke Mission. As soon as he landed on Ironhoof Island, the Smoke Mission had already prompted. Mission completed. Reward: Virginia Truth's Awakening. Virginia, who was residing in the soul storage tank, could already be poured out, but now was not the right time. List did not pour out her. She was of no help on the battlefield. If he had the Magic Goat family's keel fixing technique, he could slowly ask her when he returned. Now, the smoke in front of him formed into serpentines, which was a new mission. Mission: you can't walk 1,000 miles without taking 1 step at a time. As an aspiring dragon rider lord, please perform well on the battlefield. Kill at least 1 enemy of the same level with your own hands. Only then will you be able to stand out from the masses and gain more glory. Reward: a low-level World of Warcraft of the dragon species. Low-level World of Warcraft of the dragon species. List's heart was burning with passion. I wonder what kind of World of Warcraft I'll be rewarded with. In the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, World of Warcraft is a rare species. A low-level World of Warcraft won't be much worse than an intermediate-level World of Warcraft. If it can be mass-produced, it'll be even more valuable. According to some busybodies, the mystical species were graded according to their preciousness. The Elven King is equal to the dragon and is more valuable than the super dragon in World of Warcraft. Semi-dragons are more valuable than dragon elves, and dragon elves are more valuable than high-level World of Warcraft dragons. High-level dragons, high-tier dragons are more valuable than great elves. Great elves are more valuable than World of Warcraft, and World of Warcraft is more valuable than World of Warcraft intermediate dragon. Intermediate dragons are more valuable than Advanced World of Warcraft. Advanced World of Warcraft is more valuable than fairies. Fairies are more valuable than Intermediate World of Warcraft, and Intermediate World of Warcraft is more valuable than low-level World of Warcraft, low-level dragons. Low-level dragons are more valuable than dragon-type beasts. Dragon-type beasts are more valuable than sprite worms. Sprite worms are more valuable than low-level World of Warcraft, and low-level World of Warcraft beasts are more valuable than low-level World of Warcraft beasts mixed with a bit of World of Warcraft bloodline. In Flower Town and Black Horse Island, List already has two kinds of dragon-type beasts, black blood horses and dragon-type cows, as well as intermediate World of Warcraft blizzard beasts and low-level World of Warcraft mallards. There is also the black pearl clam, which should be regarded as a World of Warcraft beast. No, it should be a sea monster shell. Each of them is an industry worth vigorously developing. Of course, they all need time to settle. Without a few years of cultivation, they will not be able to burst out of too much value for the time being. I don't know if the low-level dragon beast rewarded by the smoke task can be developed into a breeding industry, but in any case, in this battle to clean up Main City, I will kill an elite Earth Knight with my own hands. List didn't have a bloodthirsty desire, nor did he like killing people. But since it is war, he should be mentally prepared for the enemy to die while he lives. From the moment he had chosen to step onto the battlefield, killing had become a compulsory course. In fact, he had adapted very well to it. The two rats had been a drill. Since they had chosen to find out information about the Black Knights, they were his enemies. He will never be merciful to let the mice go and let them bring the news back to Main City. About an hour later, List was practicing Aura Decay when he heard familiar footsteps, causing him to raise his head and look at the door. Dang, dang, dang. There was a knock on the door, accompanied by Paris's voice. Lord Baron, it's me. Please come in. When Paris came in, he immediately asked, Did you encounter any danger? No, the castle of Main City is indeed very tense, but none of the night there can find my existence. Paris replied with a little pride and then said, It seems that they do not intend to defend the castle. I found them digging tunnels leading to Main City. They are preparing to escape at any time? I think they may be braver than I thought. I saw that Baron Mori, and I also heard his secret conversation with the other knight. They are preparing to gather in Main City through the tunnel. When you lead the orders of chivalry to attack the castle, they will attack from Main City. List nodded. Very good thinking. Thank you, Paris. It's just a small matter. You should be very tired. Rest early. Chapter 372. The nameless castle of the Main City was located on the hillside of a low mountain near the Main City, some distance from the Main City. According to Baron Murray's plan, while the Black Orders of Chivalry were attacking the nameless castle, they would quietly gather in the city, and then charge in one go, cooperating with the castle from the inside and outside. Perhaps there would be a chance to break through the Black Orders of Chivalry. The reason why the knight was powerful was that when the knight charged, all the knight's combat energy would converge into one and burst out with great attack power. It was almost indestructible. This was the reason why the knight could rule the world. Of course, with Dosen as his backing, List was not afraid of Baron Murray's sneak attack plan at all, because it was possible that before they finished gathering, Dosen, who could instantly cast magic, would have already demolished the nameless castle. However, now that Paris had found out the opponent's plan, List immediately decided to beat them at their own game. He would pretend to attack the castle, but in fact, he would use the telescope to observe Baron Murray's sneak attack in advance. While the opponent had not yet launched the charge, the Black Orders of Chivalry took the lead in charging. A head-on confrontation, sharpening the blade, in pursuit of maximum damage. In case the knight took the opportunity to escape, they would have to chase after them. The night was peaceful. The knight on duty did not discover the enemy's night attack. The next day, before dawn, a fire was lit to cook. By the time the sky turned white, the black orders of chivalry had already finished gathering. List, clad in fine steel armor, pulled out the red blood sword and pointed to the sky. "Let's go!" Boom! The horses, equipped with horse armor and carrying the knight, were like a torrent of tanks. They galloped toward the nameless castle in a crushing manner, raising a large amount of dust that covered the sky. With such a big movement, when they approached the hillside, they would naturally be discovered. From the telescope, List also saw the reaction of the nameless castle. Closing the door, closing the windows, the armored knight turned into archers, standing behind the castle's arrow mounds, aiming at the black orders of chivalry. This was the stance of defending to the death. With the defensive effects of a castle, it would be difficult for a knight without siege equipment to take down a castle in a hurry, even if it was a nameless castle. However, after List cast magic eyes, he clearly saw that the magic power in these archers was thin. They were not Earth Knights at all. They were just a bunch of trainee knight. The Earth Knight didn't come to defend. Instead, he let the trainee knight defend. Arrows without combat aura can't hurt the Earth Knight at all. It seems that Baron Murray is trying to confuse me, and he himself is quite decisive. He has already begun to gather from the underground tunnel to ambush me. List was a little surprised. He had thought that the other party would at least resist for a while to figure out the difference in their combat power. Then, they would pretend to defend for a while and repel a few attacks before arranging for a sneak attack. Judging from the current situation, the other party had no intention of doing so at all. They had directly launched a sneak attack. If it was an ordinary person, it would really be easy to catch them off guard. After all, no one would have thought that the sneak attack would begin before they even probed. Unfortunately, List was not an ordinary person. He directly issued an order. "Archers, step out and feint an attack." The knight proficient in archery immediately stepped out and, under the leadership of Captain Layden, began to fire suppressive shots around the castle. The Earth Knight could already attach combat aura to the arrows, which were very powerful. When they hit the castle, at least a large piece of stone would collapse. However, it was only a feint. The speed, strength, and frequency of the shots were very low. On the nameless castle, the trainee knight archers launched sneaky counterattacks. They were even less powerful and posed no threat. Riding on Black Dragon, List quietly watched the feint of attack and defense. He felt particularly comfortable watching the arrows hit the castle's outer wall and shatter stone after stone. Dosen gasped for breath. Perhaps it was stimulated by the battle scene, but it barked at List twice. List stroked its big head. "Don't be impatient, Dosen. There's no hurry in tearing down the castle." On the other side, Marcus had been holding the binoculars, observing every movement in Main City. Because Paris had provided him with the position at the end of the passage, it was easy for him to monitor the movements inside Main City. "Sir, I found knight assembling inside Main City. Report the movements of Main City at all times," List instructed, then turned to the other knight squad captains and ordered, "Maintain the state of assembly and prepare to charge at any time." "Yes, sir." He didn't let List wait. A moment later, Marcus cried out in alarm. "Sir, knight is rushing out of Main City, and they are currently charging towards us. There are nearly 100 of them." 100 knight was already the majority of the Earth Knight in the nameless castle. List suddenly raised his knight's spear and shouted, "All units, charge!" Needless to say, the black orders of chivalry had already lined up and rushed out from the hillside. He himself was also in the knight team charging. According to his original plan, he did not intend to charge with the team. He only needed to command Dosen to assist the orders of chivalry in charging and use Dosen's magic to hinder the opponents. However, the atmosphere of the battlefield still affected his emotions. Blood rushed to his head, and he brought Dosen with him as he charged after orders of chivalry. When the warhorse galloped at a speed of up to 60 kilometers per hour, the body on the horse's back undulated up and down, and the circulation of Do Chi was accelerated like the flow of blood. The knight's spear in his hand had already become an extension of his body. List directly erupted the violent combat energy of an elite Earth Knight. The Black Orders of Chivalry rushed down from the hillside, and at this time the Orders of Chivalry who launched the sneak attack had also just rushed up. The target who was caught off guard was no longer the Black Orders of Chivalry who was being sneak attacked, but the main city Orders of Chivalry who was being sneak attacked. However, the charge had already started, and no one could stop. The expression under the mask could not be seen clearly. The two high-speed torrents were about to collide. Countless rays of Do Chi bloomed, mixed and entangled with each other, converged into one, and pulled all the night into it, blending into a whole. In this whole, List became an arrow, and the violent fire attribute Do Chi filled the air, as if he was bathed in flames. Surrounded by flames, he still had a clear mind, and carefully judged the distance between the two orders of chivalry who were about to collide. When the other party entered this distance, he suddenly roared, "Trembling woods, multiple rock thorns, don't stop!" Puff, puff, puff. Dosen opened his mouth and spat out magic repeatedly. Countless rock thorns seemed to have eyes, and each one accurately pierced the bottom of a knight. If it was on flat ground, it might not be difficult for the prepared Earth Knight to avoid a single rock thorn. However, this was a charge. Ah! Ah! On the spot, several knight who were galloping at high speed were pierced through the heart by the rock thorns, and then fell heavily. The knight behind him wanted to dodge, but he couldn't do it in the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint. They could only trample on the bodies of their companions and continue to charge. The free rock thorns did not stop at all. Although they could only cause a small amount of damage, they greatly destroyed the charging formation of the Orders of Chivalry. Without giving them a chance to adjust, the Black Orders of Chivalry had already rushed over under the leadership of List. The knight's spear, which was infused with violent fire attribute Do Chi, stabbed out fiercely. An Earth Knight who could not dodge in time was stabbed in the chest by List before he had time to hold up his shield. The fine steel armor was only delayed for less than a blink of an eye before it was pierced in an instant. The spear pierced through the body of the Earth Knight, lifted him up, and flew out. A light blow. Chapter 373. First kill. There was no reward. Black Dragon leaped high, jumped over the enemy horse that had fallen to the ground, and went straight to the other horse. After List killed it with one blow, the spear did not break and continued to stab at the other Earth Knight. This Earth Knight seemed to react very quickly, forcibly twisting his body to dodge the spear to avoid being pierced. He was only grazed by the spear shaft and fell off the horse. However, the result of being stabbed to death and falling off was the same. Without waiting for List to switch to the red blood sword to finish the last hit, Dosen had already rushed over and smashed the Earth Knight's head with his paw. As an intermediate World of Warcraft, Dosen weighed more than 2 tons, and the power of his paw was comparable to that of a stone mill. With a slap, even the helmet would be torn apart. List no longer cared about the knight whose head was smashed by Dosen. He continued to charge while scanning the surroundings. Originally, the Black Orders of Chivalry caught the main city Orders of Chivalry unprepared. Coupled with Dosen's magic, the main city Orders of Chivalry directly fell into chaos, allowing the Black Orders of Chivalry to cut in. Countless knight spears stabbed into the flustered enemy. The flustered main city Orders of Chivalry not only trampled on their own people, but also failed to exert the strength of the charge. The chi that converged into one had long disintegrated in the chaos, and they fell into a situation of fighting separately. Therefore, their knight spears could not even pierce a Black Orders of Chivalry knight. The situation was one-sided. List's heroic spirit grew, and he once again looked for a third Earth Knight to assassinate. With Dosen's assistance, the Rockthorns constantly destroyed the enemy's formation, and there was no decent resistance at all. Moreover, he was an elite Earth Knight who took potions. His chi was surging and the fire surge was frequently erupting. In a short period of time, 1/3 of the 100 Orders of Chivalry had fallen. At this time, the archers besieging the nameless castle also rushed over and shot arrows at the charging knight. The accurate arrows continued to harvest heads. Dosen, archer, charging knight. Under the 3 strikes, the main city orders of chivalry fell into a state of destruction and couldn't even escape. After being penetrated by the black orders of chivalry, they immediately turned around and charged a second time, then a third time. They harvested heads like harvesting wheat. List's performance was the wildest. He remembered that he still had a smoke mission to complete, kill an enemy of the same level, an elite Earth Knight. He didn't know if the first one he stabbed to death would be an elite Earth Knight, so he had to hurry up and try to kill a few more Earth Knights. He would eventually meet the elite Earth Knight. After the Knight's spear broke after killing 2 people in a row, he immediately switched to the red blood sword and killed another person. After 3 rounds of charging, there were no more enemies around him. Unwilling to give up, he took out the bow and arrows on his back and harvested the Earth Knight who had fallen to the ground. He really did manage to pick up a few heads. At this moment, there wasn't a single main city knight left standing on the battlefield. Black orders of chivalry continued to charge forward, completing a glorious massacre. Dosen's contributions couldn't go unnoticed. The might of middle-level World of Warcraft was on full display, especially when it destroyed the enemy's charging formation. Compared to human mages who needed time to cast spells, World of Warcraft casted spells instantly by opening their mouths. After all, most of World of Warcraft's mana came from oneself, but mages had to gather mana from the air. The casting speed of the two wasn't on the same level. Even a great mage who was proficient in the earth element would not be able to destroy the charging formation so smoothly. "I surrender!" An Earth Knight who was lying on the ground, covered in blood, cried out in pain, because he found that List had already aimed his bow and arrow at him. Under normal circumstances, a knight could choose to surrender and then let the family or the lord redeem him with money. If no one came to redeem him, he would be reduced to a serf and work for the captor to pay off the debt. Nobles followed this rule and rarely killed captives because it cost a lot of money to redeem a captive, which was more cost-effective than killing. However, the bow and arrow in List's hand still pierced the knight's throat under the helmet. Because the Grand Duke was very angry, he directly ordered that no captives were needed. Traitors could not be forgiven. The most important thing was that these knights were not expeditionary knights. After being captured, their land and wealth would be taken away by the Grand Duke. There was no money to redeem them. Phew! After confirming that there were no knight alive, List put down the bow and arrow in his hand and glanced coldly at the blood-stained battlefield. More than 100 Earth Knights were all lying in pools of blood. The sorrowful cries of the warhorses and the smell of blood in the air intertwined, rendering the cruelty of war. The first charge, the first kill, the first victory. List did not know how he felt at the moment. Growing up under the red flag, he had not even killed a chicken, let alone killed a man. However, after transmigrating to this world, he finally began to hunt his own kind after killing World of Warcraft. The hot blood slowly dissipated, and he felt an urge to vomit. But he knew that he could not vomit, otherwise his heroic image of killing the enemy would immediately collapse. As a noble and a knight, he could not lose his brave and fearless performance. "Commander, all the enemy knight have been beheaded." Captain Layden rushed over on his horse. His body was stained with a lot of blood, but it was all other people's. "How are our casualties?" "No one died. Only 2 knight were seriously injured and lost the ability to fight. The seriously injured knight will be taken care of by the retainers. Send 2 knight squads to main city to guard the tunnel exit." List resisted the urge to vomit and coldly said, "The rest will follow me to besiege the castle." Black Dragon galloped again. The sun shone fiercely and the warm wind blew on his face, slightly freeing him from the influence of killing people. He needed to vent, perhaps because his attention was once again diverted by the war. He no longer thought about the human limbs on the ground, nor did he think about the blood of his own kind on his hands. He only wanted to tear down the nameless castle. In fact, from the moment he killed the rats, he had already thoroughly integrated into this world and its morality. War was the fate of a knight. Blood was the wine of nobles. Seeing that Main City's orders of chivalry had failed in their sneak attack and had instead been wiped out, the guards of the nameless castle fell into a complete panic. The few dozens of Earth Knight didn't dare to show their faces. However, just as List and Dosen were about to tear down the nameless castle, the window of the castle opened and a white flag stretched out. White represented purity. Purity represented nothingness. Nothingness represented complete failure. Complete failure. Thus, they surrendered. This was a flag that indicated surrender. Soon, the castle gate opened and the knight who had taken off their armor came out dejectedly. One of the knights shouted, "Howard Wooden Stick," representing all the nobles of Main City, surrenders to the noble conqueror. Immediately after, the group of knight knelt on one knee, expressing their allegiance. This made List, who was about to tear down the castle to vent his anger, stare blankly. According to the Grand Duke's order, no captives were accepted. Therefore, he killed the enemy knight who had charged forward. But the surrendered knight had no weapons or armor, which put him in a difficult position. Kill? Chapter 374. Seemingly noticing List's hesitation, Captain Leiden approached and reminded him in a low voice, "Sir Captain, the Grand Duke's order is not to accept prisoners. As long as the Grand Duke's dragon was still alive, he was still the sole authority of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire." Of course, List would not let his conscience get the better of him and release these people. From the moment they decided to resist, it was a battle to the death. Traitors could not be forgiven. They could only blame themselves for following the wrong lord and not being able to repent in time. List's gaze swept over the group of people kneeling on one knee. He slowly said, "Captain Leiden, give each of them a chance to write a will, hand over the sprite, and then let them commit suicide. Copperfield and Nash, take over the castle and clean up the threat. We will rest in the castle for a day. Marcus, lead the night squad and follow me outside for a patrol." He no longer asked how the surrendered knight would commit suicide. List went straight to the barley field on the other side of the castle. According to the information revealed by the rats, the barley field was breeding a sprite worm. He was going to secretly contract the sprite worm as his personal trophy. No one else knew about the sprite worm. Therefore, swallowing it would not be a problem. The barley field was very easy to find. After releasing magic eyes to survey the area, he quickly found the protected barley worm stalk. The barley worm had yet to be born, but it should be soon. It might be born in 1 or 2 days. Finding the sprite worm, yet being unable to immediately take it away, made List a bit vexed. He was still anxious to rush to Oxhair City to join the Count and sweep away Count Snade's orders of chivalry and plunder military exploits. He had no time to stay here. However, since he did not intend to leave today, then he could still wait. He thought, if the barley worm is born before tomorrow morning, I will immediately contract it. If it is not born before tomorrow morning, then I will have Marcus temporarily stay here to take care of the wounded. After the barley worm is born, I will dig out the worm stalk and bring it with me. Digging out the worm stalk was very troublesome and might even harm the worm stalk itself. The best way was to bestow a contract with a subordinate and then let the sprite worm migrate the worm stalk. The sprite worm could be bestowed as a reward to a follower. But usually no lord was willing to do so. This was because sprite worms could only contract twice. Since the lord had already contracted once, the sprite worm could only contract once more after dissolving the contract. Otherwise, its value would be greatly reduced. The sprite worms sold on the market were wild sprite worms that had not been contracted. The barley sprite worm before him clearly met the conditions for a reward. However, List was not willing to give it to his subordinates. He would rather give his subordinates a large sum of gold coins to buy sprite worms than to give away the sprite worms he encountered. "Philip, take 2 squires with you and wait here. Pay close attention to the birth of the barley worm." "Yes, my lord." After inspecting the barley worm stalk, List quickly led the night squad back to the castle. At that moment, the castle had been changed to a black tulip flag. Captain Leiden came over to greet him. "Sir Commander, all of the main city knight have committed suicide." A group of civilians from Main City hurried over and buried the corpses. "The inventory of the castle storehouse has already begun. There is enough food and water, but there are no sprite worms." "There aren't any?" "Yes, these knight received the news and have long since transferred their sprite worms to their wives and children. As for their wives and children, we did not inquire about them. After all, sprite worms cannot be contracted a third time." List nodded. These knight squad had clearly been prepared. It was unknown how many benefits Marquis Bull had promised them to dare to defend Iron Hoof Island at the risk of opposing Sapphire Grand Duke. Under normal circumstances, apart from Marquis Bull's diehard followers, the other aristocrats should have long since surrendered and welcomed the Imperial Army. After all, the Grand Duke had a dragon. Perhaps the news brought by the rat was true. Great lords like Snade, whose children were by Marquis Bull's side and their wealth had probably been transferred to Iron Hoof City, could only choose to be loyal and not dare to betray Marquis Bull. After betraying Marquis Bull, they would lose everything. They could only hope that after the success, they would continue to gain glory. List did not know what these knight squad were thinking, nor did he want to know. He had come here to render meritorious service. With a lord like Snade vowing to resist to the death, it would be convenient for him to fight for glory. He had already arranged for 2 Earth Knights to rush to Oxhair City at top speed to report to Count Lee William the information he had obtained. A wizard had secretly communicated with Snade, mentioning a major event and threatening to promote Snade to the rank of Marquis after the success. As for what this major event was, it was still unclear. It was better to let the Count worry about it. As he followed Captain Leiden into the nameless castle, a stench of excrement and urine assailed his nostrils, making him want to vomit. There were probably too many people living here, resulting in the stench inside the castle. It was like a castle-style toilet. "Get someone to clean up the 3rd floor I live in immediately." The 3rd floor was continuously washed clean of the filth in the corridors and rooms. Although there was still a faint stench that could not be dispelled, it was still barely habitable. List sat behind a desk that originally belonged to an aristocrat. He listened to Captain Leiden and the others report on the spoils of war. As a small city, the spoils of war in Oxhair City were not very abundant, especially when the elves had long been moved away. Finally, he thought for a moment and gave an order. "Divide the gold coins evenly. Remember, tell all the knight to keep their mouths shut and keep their share of the gold coins." This was dividing the spoils of war privately, which was against the Grand Duke's order. However, Count Lee William had said before that the looting of the spoils of war should be restrained, but he did not strictly forbid it. This kind of thing could not be prohibited. In a war with no profits, why should the knight contribute? After all, the lord and knight provided the equipment and logistics themselves, including their own lives. No one would believe that they could get their share after handing the spoils of war to the Grand Duke. The Grand Duke would definitely favor the Blue Blood Alliance. Captain Leiden replied with a smile. "Commander, all the knight knows that they should keep their mouths shut after getting the benefits." List nodded. "Replenish the lost weapons from Oxhair City, and replenish the consumed food from here as well. Right, call Marcus for me." Marcus quickly arrived. List motioned for him to close the door first, and then said, "Teacher Marcus, I have a task for you. Go to Oxhair City and search for craftsmen. Forget about ordinary craftsmen, but they must be craftsmen or above, especially craftsmen such as papersmiths and salt makers that the Flower Town does not have." Marcus asked, "Sir, can we take these craftsmen with us? Tell them that after the fall of Iron Hoof Island, everyone will bear the wrath of the Grand Duke, because they are all sinful traitors. The Flower Town can provide them with better shelter. As for taking them away, the sea is so vast that they can always be sent to the ship." It was very difficult to take away a large number of supplies from the island without passing through the port. However, it was not very difficult to take away a few craftsmen and their families. Chapter 375. Sitting in the study and looking at the environment outside the window that was different from the Flower Town, List couldn't help but struggle for a moment with the revulsion of killing. In the end, he used reason to overcome his chaotic emotions, focused his mind, and called out the smoke mission. Mission completed. Reward: a low-level dragon species world of Warcraft Chocobo. Obviously, among the Earth Knights killed by List, there was an elite Earth Knight, so the mission was determined to be completed. But he was a bit puzzled. What is a Chocobo? It feels like a low-level ostrich-like dragon, whether it was an ostrich-like or not. A low-level dragon was a valuable prize. I wonder how this Chocobo will become my reward. He only planned to stay in the castle for one day. However, the surroundings had already been checked, and there was no trace of a Chocobo. Fortunately, List wasn't in a hurry. As long as it was a smoke mission reward, it would always find the right time to pull the threads of fate and intersect with a Chocobo. He began to check the new mission, and after reading its contents, his eyes lit up. Mission: victory in the first battle. The loser will have to give up everything and the winner will have everything. Complete a thorough search of this castle. Everything obtained will be considered as spoils of war, including the treasures in the underground vault. Reward: a lesser elven soldier. Lesser elven soldier. This was a weapon that sounded interesting but was in fact very cruel. It was because fairies had to be killed and soaked in their blood in order to be made into lesser elven soldiers. After absorbing the magic power from the blood of fairies, the lesser elven soldier would undergo a special change. According to value, a lesser elven soldier could be sold for a dragon coin, which was tens of thousands of gold coins. But to make a beautiful thing like fairies into a weapon was very cruel. List would never do such a thing, but he wouldn't give up on the lesser elven soldiers that he had already made. Not all of the spoils of war in the castle will be mine. They have to be sealed and handed over to the Grand Duke. That doesn't prevent me from taking away the most valuable things. It seems that the lesser elven soldier is in the underground warehouse. He immediately called for Captain Lawden. When you searched the castle, did you find the underground warehouse? Captain Lawden shook his head. We only found a storeroom filled with wheat flour and jerky. We didn't find any underground storerooms. I suspect that there is an underground vault in this castle. Send someone to search carefully and inform me as soon as you find it. With his subordinates instructing him, List didn't need to search by himself. Very soon, Captain Lawden excitedly reported, "Captain, your guess is very accurate. You really found the underground warehouse." The underground warehouse was next to the entrance of the underground tunnel. It was disguised as a wooden wall, but after removing the wooden wall, there was a sturdy stone door inside. There was a special lock on the stone door, and the knight was looking for the key. "Sir, the key has not been found yet. Don't bother looking. Just smash it open." List suspected that this group of knight had no brains. They were all Earth Knight with a body full of doqi. It was not their own castle, so they could just demolish it with brute force. After receiving List's reminder, the two Earth Knights immediately found a few broken knight spears, poured their fighting energy into them, and started to dismantle the stone door. No matter how sturdy the stone door was, after being destroyed by the Earth Knights, it would still collapse. Very soon, a pitch-black tunnel was revealed, leading deep underground. List asked someone to bring a torch and shone it into the tunnel. It was surrounded by rough stone walls. There was no sign of any mechanism, and with the rough workmanship of this castle, it did not seem like there would be any mechanism. An Earth Knight was sent to take the lead, and List followed closely behind. He found that the tunnel was much shorter than he had imagined. After turning a corner, he directly reached the underground warehouse. The area was not very big, and it was only a very small warehouse. There were a few rows of holes on the walls of the warehouse, and there were 8 wooden boxes. "Open one of the boxes and take a look," List ordered. The Earth Knight immediately pulled out the wooden box and used the knight spear to smash the lock on it. He opened the lid, and immediately, silver coins were reflected under the light of the torch. It was a box that stored silver coins. Looking at the number, there were at least a few thousand silver coins. It was equivalent to dozens of gold coins. Silver coins are also worth storing in a box. List was speechless. Usually, the boxes that were hidden in a secret room would be filled with gold when they were opened. The Earth Knight was very excited. "Leader, can we divide these silver coins? As long as you can take it away, I don't mind if you divide it." "Thank you, leader. Your generosity is admirable." The Earth Knight wanted to immediately grab a handful of silver coins and stuff them into his clothes. However, he restrained himself and pulled out the second box and opened it again. It was still a box of silver coins. There were 4 consecutive boxes, and all of them were silver coins. He did not know what was wrong with the owner of the castle. If it was gold coins, it might not even be enough to fill half of the box. Instead, he used silver coins to fill 4 boxes. If it was gold coins, each knight could easily take away a few. But now it was silver coins. Everyone had to fill their pockets before they could take it away. There were 4 boxes left on the wall. They were no longer filled with silver coins, gold coins, or copper coins. Instead, they were filled with armor. "Leader, this set of armor is very light. It should not be an ordinary fine steel armor." The Earth Knight handed the armor to List. List felt it. The armor was indeed very light and thin, but its hardness was no less than the fine steel armor he was wearing. This made his eyes flicker. "It's a mithril armor. Congratulations, leader." The Earth Knight immediately flattered him. There was no doubt that they would get gold and silver coins. List should get better loot. This set of mithril armor was not bad. Among the 4 boxes, there were 3 sets of mithril armor. List was very satisfied. This set of mithril armor was worth at least 7 or 8 sets of fine steel armor. He accepted it with a smile. The last box. There was only 1 bow. It had an emerald green bow arm and a silver white bowstring. The shape was obviously the most popular straight bow in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. It was similar to the English longbow. It was about 1 meter long. The bow arm was not very curved, and it did not have the curved end of a recurve bow. Strictly speaking, this kind of straight bow was not very popular with List. He knew that the development of bows would eventually compromise with recurve bows or compound bows. But the straight bow was relatively simple to make, and it was not easy to change the internal stress. It was easy to maintain and tame. He grabbed the longbow and pulled the bowstring. It was very hard. Without battle energy, List could hardly pull it. He quickly operated the battle energy in his body, pulled the longbow, and let go. Buzz! When the bowstring and the bow arm were restored, the feeling of power could be felt through the vibration of the air. A very strong bow. After trying it, he only felt that his original hardwood bow should be thrown away. This emerald green longbow was worthy of his superb archery skills. Moreover, he had already guessed that this longbow was the smoke mission reward of the Wisp Soldier. Holding the bow, he said, "This bow and the 3 sets of mithril armor belong to me. You can divide the silver coins." "Yes, my lord." Returning to the study, he carefully looked at the emerald green longbow in his hand. He found that there were small serpentines engraved on the bow arm. He looked at it against the light coming from the window. The serpentines impressively read, "Wisp, Swift Shadow Bow." This was the common naming method for Wisp soldiers. Wisp meant that it was soaked in the blood of Wisp soldiers, while Swift Shadow Bow was its real name. He took out an arrow. Circulating his battle energy, he pulled the Swift Shadow Bow. List did not use multiple arrows. He only relied on the power of the bow and arrow to release the bowstring. Whoosh! The sound of breaking air rang out. The arrow was like a ray of light. In a flash, it landed on a tree not far from the castle. The arrow shaft was buried in the trunk. Chapter 376. List decided to replace the Swift Shadow Bow with his own hardwood riding bow. However, he still had to carry the riding bow for the time being. After all, he needed time to familiarize himself with the Swift Shadow Bow. The change in the nature of this little elf could be summed up in one word: fast. The arrow speed was fast. Therefore, he had to practice many times before he could master the double arrow through the Swift Shadow Bow. He started to try on the 3 sets of mithril armor. He picked out a set of more fitting mithril armor and replaced it with his fine steel armor. As for the other 2 sets, he gave the slightly larger one to Marcus. As his night class teacher, List was naturally biased towards him. After receiving the mithril armor, Marcus was extremely excited. He fiercely praised List a few times, and then said something about pledging his loyalty to List. The other knight members were full of envy and jealousy towards Marcus, but they didn't make any sarcastic remarks. This was because, according to the system of the continent's countries, Marcus was basically equivalent to List's chief knight. It was a matter of course that the chief knight would receive a better reward. As for the smaller set, List directly rewarded it to Paris. Wear this set of mithril armor, and you'll be able to block most attacks. Your safety will also be further guaranteed. Moreover, the mithril armor is very light and won't affect your movements too much. Thank you, Sir Baron. Paris received the armor with a smile. She quickly returned to her room and put on the mithril armor. The armor covered her figure, but it added a bit of valiance. How do you feel? List asked. It fits. It's just that the chest area is a bit tight. It's not very comfortable to breathe. Paris frowned as she adjusted the armor on her chest. List naturally understood the reason. This is a male armor. Put it on for now. After returning to the flower town, have the tailor and blacksmith modify the armor and loosen the sutures on the chest area. It should no longer restrict you. Big breasts were also a troublesome thing. Paris seemed to notice that the topic was a little unnatural, so she changed the subject. I still don't like wearing armor. Leather suits my fighting style better. List said calmly. Then when we get back, give me the mithril armor. I'll use it to arm my night squad. I'll have someone make you a set of leather armor with the skin of the 6-headed sea serpent king. Lord Baron, isn't this too expensive? Paris asked. Equipment is for people to use. If they can protect you, it means that their existence is valuable. List revealed a gentle smile. Don't forget, you're the bodyguard I hired. If I encounter any danger, I'll need your help. Paris's eyes lit up. I won't let Lord Baron be in danger. I believe you. They looked at each other. List's expression was still calm, but Paris blushed. She coughed and said, Then, I'll go back to my room to rest. Perhaps she didn't notice it herself, but her voice was much softer than usual. List watched Paris leave. List spat out a mouthful of turbid air. He looked at the 4 walls of the study and couldn't help but complain. There are no books in the study, what a barbarian. Black orders of chivalry rested in the nameless castle. He ate and drank to his heart's content, wasting a lot of food. If it weren't for the untimely action, List would have opened the warehouse and distributed the food from the castle to the poor serfs of Main City. Deep down, he still had compassion for the state of the universe. Unfortunately, the spoils of war that couldn't be privately divided in the castle had to be sealed up and handed over to the Grand Duke. In any case, he had to obey on the surface. He took a nap at noon. He began his daily routine of taking potions, and at the same time, he sped up the progress of practicing aura decay. He had already tasted the benefits of this chi secret skill. The chi dissipation rate in his body slowed down, and the effects of taking potions began to improve, making him intoxicated and unable to extricate himself. In the evening, when he was preparing to familiarize himself with the swift shadow bow, the retainer knight Philip brought good news. My lord, the barley worm has been bred. Without any hesitation, he immediately led the Flower Town's night squad and rushed towards the barley field with Dosen. When he arrived at the barley field, he saw a chaotic scene. The few retainer knight List had arranged to be stationed here were fighting a monster resembling an ostrich and a rooster. After seeing List and his party, the bird monster didn't dare to continue fighting and immediately turned tail and fled. However, it seemed to be attracted by something. It just ran to the nearby shrubs and continued to stare at the barley field. List rushed to the vicinity of the worm stalk. He didn't contract the barley worm immediately, but rather stared at the strange bird walking at the edge of the shrubs. A thought flashed in his mind. Is this the low-level dragon beast Chocobo that I got as a reward for the smoke mission? His appearance didn't exceed List's imagination. It was not smaller than an ostrich, had a body as fat as a rooster, and had colorful feathers. It looked quite gorgeous. It had a slender neck, a dinosaur-like head, and a large triangular beak with serrated edges. It seemed to be full of teeth. Its legs were thick and sturdy, covered in thick feathers. Moreover, they were very long, at least 1 meter in length. The Chocobo was about 2.5 meters tall. Its body was only 0.5 meter long, its legs were 1 meter long, and its neck and head were 1 meter long. This made it look somewhat strange. Now, how do I catch it? The thought flashed through his mind. He asked the retainer knight, "What happened just now, and what's with this bird?" "My lord, we were guarding the barley worm. After the barley worm was bred, for some reason, this bird rushed over and wanted to eat the barley worm. Its beak is very sharp and its movements are very fast. We were almost not its match." Xavier replied somewhat embarrassedly. It was indeed a bit shameful for several people to be unable to defeat a bird. Because the Chocobo hadn't released any magic, they didn't treat it as a World of Warcraft. Otherwise, they would have already disappeared. A trainee knight couldn't deal with a World of Warcraft. But after hearing Xavier's reply, List was still confused. You can defeat it? The Chocobo was a low-level dragon. Based on its strength, even if it couldn't defeat an intermediate World of Warcraft, it wouldn't be too far off. Xavier scratched his head. "My lord, this bird is very powerful. It looks like a giant rooster, but apart from using its beak to peck at people, it doesn't have any attack power. A low-level dragon that only knew how to peck at people. He couldn't understand." List saw that the Chocobo didn't run away, so he calmed down Dosen, who was about to catch the bird, and formed a contract with the barley worm. Jade powder and a jade box were necessary items for him to go out. He sprinkled some jade powder and stretched out his finger. Soon, the barley worm bit down on his finger. The contract was successful. "Little guy, come, I'll take your worm stalk." The barley worm obediently opened its mouth, and the worm stalk immediately shrunk to the size of a grain. It flew out of the soil and into the worm's mouth, disappearing without a trace. Putting the tired barley worm into a jade box, he gave it to the retainer knight. Then, List turned his attention to the still wandering Chocobo. Chapter 377. Since it was a young bird, things would be much easier. With Dosen's magic rock wall, it could completely block the way and then catch a turtle in a jar. But List didn't choose to do so. Looking at the reluctant Chocobo, he suddenly felt that the bird must have a request. It appeared because of the barley sprite worm, which means it feeds on sprite worms. That's a bit hard to accept. Although sprite worms aren't as valuable as low-rank dragons, they're still terrifying to raise. Feeding on sprite worms might even seem extravagant to a dragon, let alone feeding a low-rank dragon. Moreover, given the rarity of sprite worms, it was truly inconceivable that a Chocobo could survive and grow so big. He deduced that the Chocobo was only interested in sprite worms. Maybe I can lure it with something else? While thinking, he had someone bring some jerky and tossed it over. Startled by the jerky, the Chocobo hid in the bushes, but soon came out again, cautiously approached the jerky, lowered its head and pecked at it, but didn't eat it. It doesn't eat meat? List had someone throw bread and fruit, and found that the Chocobo did eat a bit, but didn't show much interest, still staring at the sprite worm in the retainer knight's hand. "Sir, this strange bird probably wants to eat the barley sprite worm," Marcus said directly. "Just shoot it down. Leaving it alive would be a waste to the sprite worm. Don't worry, I'll try again." List rejected. He didn't believe that the Chocobo rewarded by the smoke mission was to eliminate the abundant sprite worms in his territory. After thinking about it, he decided to try the effect of the jade. Maybe this low-rank dragon also liked to eat jade. He threw the jade next to the Chocobo's feet. The Chocobo lowered its head and pecked at it. Indifferent. Jerky didn't work, bread and fruit didn't work, jade didn't work either. List immediately frowned. Does this bird really want to lust after the sprite worm? "Sir, Shoot it, Marcus suggested again. Trembling Woods also barked. It was also a little impatient. However, List still chose to try seducing him. After all, this was his reward, so he had to treat it gently. But half an hour later, the chocobo had been showered with all sorts of items, and still none of them had managed to lure it. At this time, he could no longer be gentle. With a cold face, he gave the order, "Dosen, the rock wall." Boom! Dosen lunged forward, opening his mouth to spit out magic, and a 10-meter wall of rock appeared behind the chocobo. Clatter! The chocobo squawked and ran, its movements light and agile, circling the rock wall from the left. But before it could escape, Dosen cast another stone wall. This middle-level World of Warcraft had greatly improved its intelligence under List's training, and it knew how to use magic to hunt. However, everyone had underestimated the speed and agility of the chocobos. This low-level dragon that looked like a long-necked rooster was able to leap high into the air like a flea. As long as the path was blocked by a rock wall, it would leap high into the air and leap over it. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't even catch a single feather. The night squad had already circled around the bushes, trying to surround the chocobo, but they couldn't. Even when List gave the order to shoot with arrows, they still couldn't hit it. Even after sweating profusely, the chocobo was still jumping around unscathed. "Sir, something's wrong with this bird. It's not a normal beast," Marcus said with a dark expression after a few missed shots. List waved his hand, no longer wasting his energy. The plan to surround the chocobo had failed. "It really is something else. If we can't stop it, we should all stop." Fortunately, the chocobo seemed to be toying with them. It could have run away, but it chose not to, instead playing hide and seek with them. One could only imagine how strongly it was attracted to the barley worm. Otherwise, it wouldn't have taken the risk to stay here. The night squad stopped, and Dosen also lay on the ground with its tongue hanging out. It was the most ferocious in its pursuit, but it still couldn't catch up to the chocobo no matter how hard it tried. All it could do was stick out its tongue awkwardly, pretending that the heat was affecting its performance. As they stopped, the chocobo also stopped, jumping onto a rock wall and staring at List's squad, as well as the jade box with the barley worm in it. The best thing to do now was to use the barley worm as bait to lure the chocobo into the trap. But List couldn't bear to do that. With the chocobo's speed and agility, it would be very awkward if it ate the bait and still couldn't stay. Besides, he couldn't tell if it was worth it to lose a barley worm for a chocobo of unknown nature and uses. Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration. He thought of a new plan. He had Marcus find some rope, make a few hunter's ropes, and pretend to throw them on the ground. He then picked up the jade box, opened the lid, and waved it around to attract the chocobo's attention. The yellow barley worm immediately attracted the chocobo's attention. Cluck! Cluck! List quickly closed the lid. He turned around, put the barley worm into another jade box, and secretly passed it to Marcus. Then he turned around again, holding the empty jade box, and placed it in the center of the rope trap. Then he slowly retreated until he was about 10 meters away and waited quietly with Marcus and the others, each holding a rope. Cluck! The chocobo clearly didn't understand what the ropes on the ground were. Its intelligence hadn't evolved to this level yet. So after pacing back and forth impatiently, it finally couldn't hold back its desire for the barley worm, and tentatively walked towards the jade box, only to shrink back again halfway. After walking back and forth a few times, it finally couldn't hold back anymore, and rushed towards the jade box. When it stepped into the trap, List suddenly yelled, "Pull!" The other Earth Knights all pulled on the ropes in their hands, but most of them missed, except for the one in Griffin's hand, which successfully hooked onto the chocobo's claws and instantly pulled taut. This sudden turn of events shocked the chocobo, and it hurriedly turned around to run, but the rope tugged on it, and it fell to the ground with a thud. At that moment, Dosen was like a black brick, pouncing on the chocobo just as it was about to get up, pinning it to the ground. "Dosen, no biting!" List hurriedly ordered. He didn't want his hard-earned reward to be bitten to death by Dosen. Dosen had already obeyed the order instinctively, and didn't bite down, only holding the struggling chocobo down, its huge body pinning the chocobo down. Then the riders of the night squad rushed over, grabbing ropes for the chocobo's heads, legs, and wings, and tying them up. They had successfully captured a low-level dragon. So fat! Charles Pitfall rubbed the chocobo's belly as he tied it up, exclaiming, "Sir, this bird is enough for us to eat for a few days." List rubbed the chocobo's dinosaur-like head, satisfied with this hunt. "There's no way I'm going to eat it. I'm going to tame it and make it my mount." Chapter 378. By the time the chocobo was captured, the sky was almost dark. After sending away the members of the Orders of Chivalry who came to watch the fun, Liszt began to think about how to tame the chocobo. This wasn't a horse that could be successfully ridden by defeating it. This was a low-level draconic beast, probably not yet an adult, but it was already full of magic. Magic Eye's field of vision was a cyan magical glow, indicating that it was a low-level wind-type draconic beast. The wind-type world of Warcraft generally ran very fast, as evidenced by the chocobo's performance. It still can't release magic, otherwise it would be even harder to capture. But how do I tame it without the feelings and conditioned reflexes that I've cultivated since childhood? I can't tame it like I tamed Stupid Woman in a short period of time. Especially looking at it now, it's very hostile towards me, making it even harder to tame. Liszt stood in the cage, looking at the chocobo in the corner and pondering. The chocobo had been untied, but it was kept in a cage in the castle's storehouse. When Liszt first came in, the chocobo tried to attack Liszt, but was hammered a few times by Liszt's aura-infused fists, and it shrank into a corner, not daring to look directly at Liszt. This allowed Liszt to study it in peace. Casting Magic Eye, he observed the magical state of the chocobo back and forth, looking for any differences from ordinary World of Warcraft. I'm sure that this strange bird is the low-level draconic beast chocobo rewarded by the smoke mission. Currently in its infancy, the magical power in its body seems to be a bit stagnant, not coherent enough. When it came to World of Warcraft, Liszt dared to call himself Coral Island's #1 expert. After all, he studied Blizzard beasts all day long. Liszt had a full set of notes on Dosun's changes, and now he still had 8 small notes, so he was very clear about the changes in magical power in World of Warcraft. There was also the magic of elves. He also had a lot of observations and records, even of sirens. So, he quickly discovered that the magic of the chocobos was different from that of magical beasts. Its mana seems to be somewhere between World of Warcraft and elves. From the way it's dissipating, its mana dissipates much slower than World of Warcraft's mana. Perhaps this situation can be determined by the degree of solidification of the magic power itself? Liszt secretly guessed. He had summarized the magic of different species. The magic of a dragon is undoubtedly the most magical. It can be engraved for a long time without dissipating. The fire dragon on Black Horse Island has been dead for many years, but its magic can still be turned into a magic dragon. The degree of solidification was very high, almost permanently indestructible. The magic power of the elves was undoubtedly second only to that of the dragons. Through the magic released by the wormstalk, it constantly affected the surrounding plants. Although it couldn't be engraved for a long time, it could slowly infiltrate the surrounding environment. The direction of solidification was different from that of a dragon's magic, but the effect was similar. World of Warcraft's magic was undoubtedly a bit weak, could only trigger fixed spells. However, in comparison, the Do-Chi of the humans was the most pitiful. This was because they were losing a large amount of Do-Chi at every moment. It was simply an existence that could not be stopped. Even so, the use of Do-Chi by humans could not be said to be bad. This was because there were unlimited possibilities to use different Do-Chi techniques. Dragons were like beings whose magic was solidified to the extreme. They could even represent a certain rule. Humans were born without magic and couldn't store it for long, but there were endless ways to cultivate and refine their own magic. Combat energy is a type of magic. It was like 2 extremes. Liszt even had a bold guess. Infinitely changing combat energy, combined with the most magical magic, could there be a very wonderful chemical reaction? Maybe this is why the Dragon Knight is invincible in this world. There wasn't much theoretical evidence to support his guess. The Dragon Knight was an existence that couldn't be explained at the moment. He put away his thoughts and looked at the magic of the chocobo. It seems that the magic has reached a critical point. This reminds me of Dosun's evolution, stimulated by the bloodline fruit. Maybe this chocobo is also on the verge of transformation? Is it hoping to use the magic of the sprite worm as a breakthrough? The more he thought about it, the more likely it seemed. Otherwise, it wouldn't explain why the chocobo was still looking at the sprite worm even though it was surrounded by people. Unfortunately, I won't take out the sprite worm to feed to the chocobo. Each sprite worm not only represented value, but also beauty. He thought of Ella, wondering if the thorn sprite would rebel in the castle if it lost its restraints. If I can't use the sprite worm, how can I stimulate the chocobo's transformation? List touched the space gem and took out a bottle of thorn potion. Can this potion have the same effect? External magic stimulation should be able to replace the sprite's magic. It's worth a try. In fact, there was no need to guess. As soon as he took out the thorn potion, the chocobo reacted, straightening its body and staring at the crystal tube in List's hand. Cluck! You want it? Cluck! Let me ride you and I'll give it to you. Cluck! The chocobo dodged List's approach, but its eyes were still fixed on the thorn potion. List thought for a moment, then took out a small jade box, poured out a bit of the thorn potion, and handed it to the chocobo. The chocobo looked at List's outstretched hand and quickly pecked at it, taking the jade box with its mouth, then tilted its head back and drank the potion that was not even the size of a fingernail. After he finished drinking, he stuck out his tongue and licked the jade box until the jade box was about to break. Only then did he reluctantly throw the jade box away and shout at List, "Clatter! You still want it? If you want it, let me ride you." After a few more attempts, the chocobo finally fell for the temptation, and List leapt up and rode on its back. Its wide, plump body was perfect for riding. Its thick feathers were also soft, especially around its neck and back. It was like a natural saddle. The chocobo on List's back was about to explode. But in the next moment, it quickly steadied itself and let him ride. Because List had already brought the remaining half of the thorn potion to its mouth. The temptation of the thorn potion was irresistible, and it picked up the crystal tube with its mouth, tilted its head back and drank the potion, then licked the tube clean and cried out in pleasure, "Cluck!" It temporarily forgot that there was someone riding on its back. "Very good, that's it, let me ride you and you'll get the potion. Got it?" List smiled proudly. Taming a low-level dragon was just that easy. Unlike pure beasts or World of Warcraft, chocobos were highly intelligent, and this made them easy to tempt. Riding represented the potion. If you want the potion, you have to be ridden. The simple logic was quickly imprinted in its intelligent brain. After riding the chocobo around the cage a few times and seeing that it had gotten used to being ridden, List shouted outside, "Thomas, open the cage door. Open the door." The chocobo shot out like an arrow, swinging List off its back, showing signs of its wild side. List hurriedly pulled out a new thorn potion, instantly stabilizing the chocobo, then used the potion to guide the chocobo back towards the cage. Finally, after losing another thorn potion, the chocobo obediently entered the cage. Tamed. Chapter 379. After capturing the chocobo, List was ready to give it a name. Should I name it after its species, or Saber after the hair on its head? He rubbed his chin in thought. Or should I name it Kendrick after its cluck, or Kata Duck? If I name it after Dosun and Blessed Curls, I should call it Saucy. But List didn't like the name Saucy. Looking at its weak appearance, I might as well call it Weak Chicken. No, Weak Chicken would make my mount ugly. Let's call it Loki. Loki as the name of the chocobo had been decided. In fact, he had thought of using Rainbow as the name of the chocobo, because the feathers of the chocobo were bright and colorful. But Rainbow couldn't reflect the characteristics of the chocobo. This low-level dragon beast could run and jump, and apart from not being able to fly, it was a perfect mount. Of course, a name was just a code name, not demanding. Moonlight shone through the window. List felt that no matter how many achievements he made in this war, he had at least earned back his costs. A chocobo, a barley worm, a lesser elf soldier, and 3 sets of mithril armor. Next, assist the Count in killing Snade. There will be even better rewards. I wonder if it's a high-level Chi secret manual suitable for me. He called out the smoke mission. After searching the castle's underground vault, the previous mission was completed. Mission completed. Reward: a lesser elf swift shadow bow. The new mission was a bit more difficult. Mission: main city has been captured. The obstacles around Oxhair City have been removed. The climax of the campaign is imminent. Please hurry to Oxhair City to assist Lee William Tulip in besieging and killing Count Snade of Oxhair City. Reward: high-level Chi secret manual. High-level Chi secret manual referred to the cultivation secret manual for the Sky Knight, because the Sky Knight's Chi was high-level. At present, there was only one high-grade Chi secret manual on Coral Island, which was the Giant Wave Breaks the Tide cultivated by the Count. This Chi secret manual was of the water attribute, which was not suitable for List. I hope I can be rewarded with a high-grade fire attribute Do Chi manual. After practicing Aura Decay for 2 hours, he took out a cup of fresh dragon milk from the gem space and drank it. Then he began to sleep. The next day, he woke up at dawn. After washing up, the army set off. This time, he didn't ride Black Dragon, but a chocobo. Along the way, he continued to tame chocobos and familiarize himself with them. Loki left. With the Thorn Potion as a guide, List quickly established a simple set of commands. Loki's IQ was very high, and his cooperation was very smooth. The only problem was that he had to spend a lot of money. He had used up 2 Thorns potions in the morning, plus the 2 potions he had used last night. It had been less than a day since he had tamed it, and he had used up 4 potions, which was equivalent to throwing away more than a dozen gold coins. It wasn't enough to just train the password. He also needed to train the body's commands to complete its control. I hope that Loki will soon break through the shackles of magic power and enter a new level, no longer needing the help of magic potions. Otherwise, even a Count wouldn't be able to support this kind of magic potion. He cast magic eyes and looked at Loki's increasingly abundant magic power. He felt that in a few days it would be able to break through. Maybe at that time Loki would be able to spit out magic. As for how many kinds of magic low-level dragons could use, he wasn't too clear. There was even less information about dragons than about dragons. Loki, run. Loki, jump. Loki, stop. The password training was very successful. In order to get the Thorns potion, Loki performed very hard. Its abilities were also revealed to List little by little. Its running speed was far faster than that of Black Dragon. An ordinary warhorse's sprinting speed was about 60 kilometers per hour. Black Dragon could sprint up to 100 kilometers per hour, and the chocobo's sprinting speed was almost twice that of Black Dragon, 200 kilometers per hour. But Black Dragon could run at high speed for nearly an hour or 2, while the chocobo couldn't even last 10 minutes. Its normal running speed was maintained at 60 kilometers per hour. When running and jumping, it could reach a vertical height of 4.5 meters and a horizontal length of 41 meters. When jumping in place, it could reach a vertical height of 3 meters and a horizontal length of 14 meters. At this level, it could be called a jumping machine. It had the elegance of a Sky Knight. A Sky Knight could fly for a short period of time. And these data were all from when the chocobo was still a juvenile. Once the chocobo reached adulthood, these data would definitely improve. Most importantly, it would be able to learn magic very quickly. He didn't know what kind of wind magic a low-level dragon of the wind attribute could use, but he hoped it wouldn't be wind blades like the Windblade Wolf. Sir, there's a small town up ahead. According to the map, it should be West Wind Town. Should we rest here for a while? It's already noon. Captain Layden ran over to ask. Then let's rest. What is this World of Warcraft? It's very powerful as a mount. Paris approached List, who was feeding the chocobo. The chocobo was probably full from drinking the potion, and was now crazily eating fruit and bread to replenish its energy. It is a vegetarian animal, but its favorite is cooked bread. After being ridden by List for a whole morning, it no longer tried to avoid List's touch, and was leisurely eating its bread. Strictly speaking, its head didn't look like a bird's. It looked more like the small dinosaur heads that List had seen on Discovery, and the feathered ancient dinosaurs that looked like birds. But the chocobo's neck and legs were very long, and its tail was as short as a chicken's. A type of flightless bird in World of Warcraft, I call it Loki, List said. He didn't reveal that the chocobo was a dragon. Even a dragon was a rare species, let alone a dragon in World of Warcraft. If the chocobo's dragon bloodline was revealed, there would definitely be a fight for it. Dosen and Loki, Lord Baron, you already have 2 World of Warcraft mounts, one of which is an intermediate-level World of Warcraft. There will be more World of Warcraft mounts in the future. In fact, my biggest dream is to ride a dragon. Everyone in the world wants to ride a dragon, but I don't think anyone in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire has ever successfully ridden a dragon. To be precise, in the 152 years since the founding of the kingdom, only the first Grand Duke has ever ridden a dragon. List smiled, looking very confident. I hope I'll be the second person to ride a dragon. Paris said, Glory to the night, Baron. May the Baron realize his dream as soon as possible. After resting for the afternoon in West Wind Town, they continued on their way. List also continued to train the chocobo. Having eaten its fill, the chocobo became a bit lazy, ignoring his orders. But when he took out another thorn potion, the chocobo quickly went back to work, going wherever he pointed. Just like that, they galloped all the way to Oxhair City by nightfall, and found the Red Orders of Chivalry's camp. Chapter 380. So, after a charge, you defeated the Orders of Chivalry and wiped out all the Earth Knight, and then the knight inside the castle surrendered, and easily took over the castle? The Earl was a little surprised by List's speed. In just 2 days, List had completed the cleanup of the main city and captured a city. But there was still no news from Jonas, who went to Little River City, and Trick, who went to Treeshade City. I have Dosen. Father, you should know the power of the intermediate World of Warcraft. The rock thorns completely disrupted the enemy's charging formation, and then they were destroyed by my Black Orders of Chivalry. Because it was a private conversation, he didn't use the title Lord Earl. Dosen grows very fast. It's only a little over a year old, but it can already show its ferocity on the battlefield. With Dosen, this battle will be easy. Currently, Snader is hiding in the Vanilla Celery Castle. No matter how I provoke him, he won't come out. It's a good chance for Dosen to destroy the castle. It's easy to destroy a nameless castle. It might be a little difficult to destroy the Vanilla Celery Castle, but it's still possible to destroy the castle structure. Destroying the structure is enough. Snader will never sit back and watch his castle be destroyed. When he attacks, I'll cut off his head. As a Sword Saint level Sky Knight, Lee William was very confident in dealing with an ordinary level Sky Knight. List smiled. I'm looking forward to it. The Earl of Coral Island was a little emotional. Unknowingly, the 3 of us have been fighting side by side on the battlefield. In a few years, Lytton should also go to the battlefield. You performed very well this time. I will remember your contribution. Accumulate a few more battle achievements, and it will be enough for you to be conferred the title of Viscount. Capturing a small city was obviously not enough to be conferred the title of Viscount. However, there was still Oxhair City that he could capture and gain some military merits. If he could capture other cities and gain some military merits, he might even be able to become a Viscount in one go, and he wouldn't have to wait for the next expansion battle. He suddenly thought of a question. Father, I asked the knight to send you a message. Did you find out what was the important matter that Snade and the magician were discussing? The elder brother of the free rat heard the secret conversation between Snade and the magician and waited for something big to happen. This made List very concerned. The Earl frowned. I've sent someone to contact Marquis Grindenton, and he wrote back to me that he will keep in touch with the first and second princes to ensure that nothing unexpected happens. As for what it is, it's not clear yet. If it's true, it should be related to the goat gathering. In fact, there was another possibility related to dragons, but the father and son did not mention it. Has Marquis Bull's angry orders of chivalry taken Oxtail City? Of course not. Marquis Wallace has rushed there, and the first prince has also sent your uncle there. With the orders of chivalry from the Pineapple family and the orders of chivalry from the Taro family, it's not difficult to resist Duke Wallace's angry orders of chivalry. But I heard that a great magician has joined the battle and the situation is in a stalemate. Can a great magician influence the battle of the Knight's Charge? List asked. He was not very clear about the concept of a great magician. He only knew that a great magician was very strong in magic, and even dared to plot against dragons. The great magician of the Grand Duchy of Maple Leaf plotted against the Light Dragon and created Paris and other black dragons. The great magician of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire plotted against the Sapphire Dragon, which led to the Marquis's betrayal. No wonder he was called an evil magician. But in common parlance, a magician can't compete with a knight. A knight can easily crush a magician. The Count thought for a moment and slowly said, "The reason why the knight is the mainstream does not mean that a knight is necessarily stronger than a magician. It only shows that the cultivation of qi is more common. As long as sufficient nutrition is provided from childhood, even the worst talent can cultivate qi. Magic, on the other hand, requires aptitude. An ordinary person, eating and drinking from childhood, coupled with ordinary qi cultivation methods, will certainly be able to cultivate low-level qi. Constantly accumulating World of Warcraft meat will certainly be able to cultivate mid-level qi. Constantly infusing magic potions, as long as one is not too stupid, will be able to cultivate high-level qi. In other words, an ordinary Sky Knight can be cultivated in batches, as long as there are enough resources. List's uncle Mesiro is an excellent example. Marquis Merlin only had one son, Mesiro, so all the resources of the Taro family were poured into Mesiro, allowing him to successfully cultivate from a good-for-nothing to an ordinary Sky Knight. Going further up, resources can't be accumulated, or in other words, even the strength of a country can't afford the next step of cultivation resources. 99 out of 100 people can cultivate qi by eating meat, and 20 of them may become Earth Knight by eating more meat. But only 10 out of 100 people can be selected as a magic apprentice and sense magic, and one of them may not become a magician. Such a significant ratio gap led to the knight ruling the world, not the magician. The Count changed the subject. Those who can become magicians are often geniuses. Making magic equipment is inseparable from them, making potions is inseparable from them, and as for fighting, in a fair duel I can defeat any great magician, but in fact, great magicians will not fight a knight alone. He gave an example. The angry orders of chivalry sneak attack the second prince's orders of chivalry. Obviously, there is the help of the great magician of the Goat Congregation, just like you brought Dosen and used magic to destroy the Knight's Charge formation. Since the great magician is so strong, why are there so few magicians following the orders of chivalry? The great magician's magic can only be used for sneak attacks. In the process of casting magic, it needs to condense free magic from the air. But when the knight charges, the qi gathers together and affects all the magic around it. The magician can't condense magic at all, and he can't even release magic. This is the advantage of Dosen. It can draw magic from its own body to release magic. When the magician is on the battlefield, as long as the knight charges, it will be declared invalid. But on the other hand, as long as the magician finds a chance to release magic, the knight will also suffer heavy casualties. The elite blue blood orders of chivalry, led by the second prince, should have been attacked by the magician. So, the Count emphasized, don't underestimate the magicians. They can always cause trouble. I see. List nodded. Father, is there a great magician hiding in Caraway Castle? Snader insisted on defending. I think he must have something to rely on. It's possible, but it doesn't matter. As long as the great magician dares to show up, my long sword will make him regret participating in the Knight's War. The atmosphere between the father and son was good. After talking about the war, the Count also gave some advice to List on his experience in cultivation. Now, the Count treated List less and less as a child, but as an adult who could discuss things with him. Liszt felt that the atmosphere was good, and it didn't make him feel uncomfortable. In any case, he had a knot in his heart, because he was not the real Count's son. However, the harmonious atmosphere didn't last long. The night came with bad news. Chapter 381. The news that Jonas sent back interrupted the Count's idea of besieging castle. Besieging the castle required several times the number of knights than the defenders, combined with sufficient combat power to buff the knights' combat power and destroy the castle. Especially the large castle with a name, its defense was strong and more difficult to attack. His original intention was to cooperate with Dosun's dismantling ability by concentrating 5 orders of chivalry to attack Castle Fragrant, suppressing the guard knight in the castle, so that Dosun could release magic to his heart's content. Now, the situation was a little grim. Jonas's Grey Orders of Chivalry suffered heavy casualties and was no longer able to attack the castle of Little River City. On the other side, the Cyan Orders of Chivalry led by Viscount Trick was also in trouble. The castle of Treeshade City was tall and strong and couldn't be attacked. The Yellow Orders of Chivalry led by Levis was helping Viscount Trick to attack together. The Count must contain the Orders of Chivalry of Castle Fragrant. Therefore, the task of support could only be placed on Liszt. Without any hesitation, the Count directly called out, "Take Dosun and go to Little River City to support the Grey Orders of Chivalry. After attacking the castle, go to Treeshade City to support the Cyan Orders of Chivalry. Liszt, you are my son blessed by the glory of the night. In this battle, earn enough glory." After experiencing the baptism of victory, Liszt was no longer afraid, only excited. He longed for war merits, and a main city was obviously not enough. Now, with the addition of Little River City and Treeshade City, and finally a share of Oxhair City's war merits, it would be almost enough. "Yes, father. I will definitely gain more glory." Set off. As the sun rose in the east, they rushed to Little River City. Along the way, Liszt was still busy taming the chocobo. This low-level dragon was observed by the Count, but the Count didn't know what breed it was or what level it was. He only treated it as a low-level World of Warcraft monster that couldn't cast magic and said, "The glory of the night truly favors you." A sword saint couldn't even find a World of Warcraft mount. Yet his son was riding one and leading the other. His heart was indeed sour. They sped along the way. At noon, he arrived at Little River City and met up with the Grey Orders of Chivalry, who was resting. Viscount Jonas left wrist was wrapped in cloth and welcomed Liszt. "Baron Liszt, thank you for your generous support. How is the battle in Main City?" "I've already annihilated the Orders of Chivalry from Main City. I'm currently meeting up with the Count in Oxhair City. Upon receiving your request for reinforcements, the Count sent me here to provide support." "You've already destroyed Main City?" Yunus was very surprised. Liszt smiled faintly. "Of course, it's very easy." Easy? Yunus really wanted to tell him not to brag in front of him, but when he thought of Dosun, he couldn't say anything. He could only change the topic. "Then, Baron Liszt, what are you going to do now? My Grey Orders of Chivalry have lost more than half of their knight. It's very difficult to organize an effective assault." "How's the damage to the castle in Little River City?" "There were originally around 150 knight, but we've heavily injured around 50 of them. The remaining 100 knight are hiding in the castle and won't come out. Then we'll tear down their castle." Dosun had only displayed his abilities during the assault. He had yet to test his ability to tear down a castle. However, with the previous battle, Liszt was very confident. "Viscount Jonas, organize the Grey Orders of Chivalry and my Black Orders of Chivalry to combine and suppress the castle. Let me command Dosun to tear down the castle." "Can Dosun do it?" "No problem." "Good." Jonas was also a straightforward person. His Grey Orders of Chivalry had suffered disastrous casualties. This battle could be said to be a loss. Now, he only hoped to quickly reverse the situation and strive for some military achievements to make up for the losses in the following battles. After the reorganization, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when the sun shone on the front of the castle, List had already changed to Black Dragon and led the Black Orders of Chivalry and Viscount Jonas to rush to the castle. Earth Knights practiced archery, but not many people practiced archery similar to multiple arrows. Therefore, when the Orders of Chivalry shot around the castle, the scale was very shocking. The arrows infused with chi were like small bombs that could always consume the rocks of the castle walls. And the sharpshooters who were proficient in archery were constantly roaming around and shooting at the archers in the castle, suppressing and counterattacking. List himself was a sharpshooter. However, he didn't shoot. Instead, he raised his shield and directed Dosen to approach the castle. "Dosen, rock grenades!" Boom! Dosen opened his mouth and spat out a spell. A huge rock condensed in the air and fiercely smashed towards the castle. Clang! The walls on the second floor of the castle cracked like the screen of a broken mobile phone. However, the walls watered with glutinous rice juice were still firm and couldn't be destroyed by a rock grenade. List also didn't expect to succeed in one shot. He constantly directed Dosen to release rock grenades and smash them into the same section of the castle wall. Occasionally, he would release rock thorns to damage the corners of the castle walls. The rock thorns had to be pierced out of the soil, so the damage to the corners was limited. However, the castle quickly shook due to the constant consumption. Coupled with the rock grenades bombardment, after a dozen or so times, Dosen was so tired that he was gasping for breath. However, this section of the wall of the nameless castle had successfully collapsed. A huge gap was revealed. Upon seeing this, Viscount Jonas suddenly threw the knight spear in his hand and fiercely stabbed at the gap. The formidable strength of the veteran elite Earth Knight was vividly displayed at this moment. The spear directly pierced through the two Earth Knights who were about to plug the gap and nailed them inside the castle. Charge! Break into the gap! List replaced the fine steel shield and threw the knight's spear with one hand, stabbing an Earth Knight who stretched his head out. He then pulled out the red blood sword and pointed it at the gap in the castle. The Black Orders of Chivalry and the incomplete Cyan Orders of Chivalry were like sharks smelling blood. They madly sprinted, jumped high from the horse's back, and crashed into the huge gap. The knight's spear was no longer usable, but the one-handed sword and two-handed sword could be used in the castle. After the charge, it was the siege sword battle. Every knight had to practice two routines, charge and sword battle. List was very proficient in sword battle, because he knew that he would be promoted to a Sky Knight very quickly. Once he was promoted, there was no need to lead the Orders of Chivalry to charge. He could directly fight alone. The second stage of the Sky Knight was called Sword Saint. It was derived from this, known as Sword Saint. At this moment, List rehearsed in advance. He paced outside the castle with Dosen and did not participate in the siege. At this time, fighting and killing in the narrow space of the castle was inevitable to get injured. He did not like it. When his strength was not enough, it was more in line with his style to use the bow and arrow outside. In the last battle, I led the charge. Everyone remembered my bravery. At this moment, I used the bow and arrow to shoot, which was more like giving the credit of victory to my subordinates. He took out the swift shadow bow. List knocked an arrow and aimed at the gap where the battle was heating up. He suddenly pulled the bowstring, poured his chi into it, and released his fingers. Whoosh! A slight sound of breaking through the air sounded. The arrow, with the special property of the swift shadow bow, turned into an invisible light and accurately pierced into the neck of a fierce Earth Knight who was waving his sword. Just now, he raised his head, and there was a gap between his helmet and armor. Chapter 382. From the moment Dosen tore a hole in the castle, a massacre was destined. Viscount Jonas, who had been holding his breath, took the lead. The two Orders of Chivalry and nearly 200 Earth Knights attacked the castle, killing everyone they saw. In this nameless castle built by the river, a contest of flesh and blood began. Countless fighting skills bloomed in the castle. List, who did not choose to attack, continued to dismantle the castle with Dosen, who had rested. He only stopped when half of the castle wall collapsed. Such a wide-open door could no longer stop the impact of the Orders of Chivalry. The battle was about to reach its climax. At this time, List waved his hand and let the remaining Earth Knights follow and squeeze into the castle. He also pulled out the red blood sword and leaped into the castle. The overall situation was settled. It was not bad to come and grab some kills. Or it could not be said to grab kills, but to overwhelm the battle and reduce the losses of the orders of chivalry. Great fire wave, he shouted in his heart. He had already casually used a fighting skill. The flame-wreathed red blood sword easily split the enemy Earth Knight's armor, leaving a deep wound that exposed the bone. After that, he launched an ordinary attack and killed an ordinary Earth Knight who looked immature in the blink of an eye. In fact, among all the knights on the battlefield, his face was also young. He quickly attacked the depths of the castle and saw that Viscount Jonas was fighting with an opponent on the castle's walkway. The two were equally matched. The others could not intervene at all. Looking at this person's attire, List immediately guessed that the other party was the owner of this nameless castle, the Viscount of Little River City. He was also a veteran elite Earth Knight. Perhaps his background was a bit poor. The castle did not even have a name, but his strength was not bad. Viscount Jonas, who was slightly injured, could not take him down. Let's end this quickly. List did not care about one-on-one fair duels. One-on-one duels were not important on the battlefield. He raised the red blood sword and immediately used the ultimate skill of Fire Dragon Drill, Heart of Fire Dragon Drill. He cut into the battle forcefully. Together with Jonas, he attacked the Viscount from the left and right. With List's help, the scales of the battle instantly tilted. A minute later, the Viscount lost his strength and staggered. List and Eunice's eyes lit up at the same time, and their long swords stabbed into the gap of the Viscount's armor almost instantly. Poochie! Poochie! The eruption of battle chi, especially List's fire-attributed battle chi, exploded in the Viscount's body, severely injuring his internal organs. Ah! The Viscount let out a loud roar. Unable to hold on any longer, he knelt on the ground and breathed his last. List couldn't stand it anymore, so he kicked the Jew in front of him to the ground. Then they moved past the corpses to support more local occupation. Eunice was also roaming around to provide support. The elite Earth Knight, who was addicted to drugs, had brilliant sword techniques, and the effect was as if he was harvesting chives. 20 minutes later, the sounds of fighting and killing in the castle weakened. Half an hour later, there were no more battle scenes. The battle of attacking and defending the castle ended just like that. There weren't many waves. Check the casualties. Shaking off the coagulated blood on the red blood sword, he walked out of the castle and breathed in the fresh air outside the castle. There was a strong smell of blood and stench in the castle. A moment later, Captain Leiden walked over. Captain, 140 Black Orders of Chivalry participated in the battle. 9 were sacrificed and 17 were seriously injured. 69 Grey Orders of Chivalry participated in the battle. 11 were sacrificed and 21 were seriously injured. In total, 105 Earth Knight and many Trainee Knight were killed in this battle. The 9 knights sacrificed by the Black Orders of Chivalry included a follower of List, Leslie Withered Leaves, who had followed him for a short time. Among the heavily injured knight, there was also a follower of List, his former classmate Rick Footprint. This 19-year-old son of a small noble had just broken through to Earth Knight and was still very young. As soon as he rushed into the castle, he was seriously injured and lay on the ground moaning for a long time. It wasn't until the battle ended that he was discovered. In fact, it was rare for a knight to be killed in one blow. Most of them were seriously injured and lost the ability to fight. After the battle ended, the wounded were captured as prisoners or rescued by their companions. The proportion of casualties was not very high. However, this time the Grand Duke refused to take prisoners. The knight on the losing side who did not die would be killed, causing all the knight in the nameless castle to die in battle. Phew! In the Battle of Main City, there were 0 casualties. In the Battle of Little River City, 9 people died. List knew that sacrifices were inevitable in battle, but he still felt bad when he heard the data. He asked, "Captain Leiden, what should we do with the people who died in the battle?" Cremate them. May they return to the glory of the night. Then cremate them. Yes, Captain. Treating the wounded, plundering the castle, resting and relaxing. After leaving it to his subordinates, Liszt and Jonas stayed in the room on the highest floor of the castle, drinking freshly brewed coffee and summarizing the battle losses. Jonas didn't look very excited, even a little pale. The battle was more difficult than I thought. I am already used to the war style of the expansion orders and am somewhat unaccustomed to siege battles. As a result, the Grey Orders of Chivalry suffered heavy losses and are now on the verge of collapse. In the previous night charge, the Grey Orders of Chivalry were unprepared and half of the knights were seriously injured. In this siege battle, there were more than 30 casualties. Now, only 37 knights could still fight. Viscount Jonas, what is the style of the expansion orders? Asked Liszt. The expansion orders mainly focus on plundering. We follow the count around the major cities and plunder the resources we want. We rarely engage in siege battles. In order to prevent precious resources from being plundered, the knight in the castle had to go out of the city to fight us, giving us the opportunity to charge. With the sacred swordsman of Waves Lee William overseeing the charge on flat ground, the orders of chivalry of the Coral Island were very powerful. Moreover, Lee William specifically picked soft persimmons to pinch. The territories of the old marquises and counts were hardly touched by Lee William. Every time he fired, he would change places, coming and going like the wind, always reaping results. What's more, there were local mercenary forces taking advantage of the chaos to plunder people, and then secretly trade with the Grand Duchy of Sapphire Night and sell serfs. Therefore, in the War of the Expansion Orders, the excess resources plundered were not taken away and were directly disposed of on the spot. The human heart had always been subdued by benefits. In the Expansion Orders, the charge on flat ground was smooth sailing. Due to the relatively little experience in siege sword battles, Jonas used the old way of thinking to lead this battle, resulting in excessive losses. If you hadn't rushed over with Dosen, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to take the castle of Little River City. The glory that I have charged for half a lifetime would have been lost here. Thinking of the terrible ending, Jonas' sturdy body trembled slightly. Perhaps, including the Count, they had more or less miscalculated the difference between this war and the expansion orders. The followers of Marquis Bull did not care about the gains and losses of territory resources. They only cared about whether they could defend the castle and resist the Grand Duke's revenge. Liszt's face was solemn, but his heart was actually quite relaxed. If the glory is lost, then we will snatch it back. Now that the castle of Little River City has been taken and all the knight have been killed, we will set off for Treeshade City early tomorrow morning and cooperate with Viscount Trick and Viscount Levis to capture Treeshade City's Greenleaf Castle. Chapter 383. Greenleaf Castle was far taller and stronger than the Nameless Castle. However, under the suppression of the Black, Yellow, Cyan, and the remaining Grey Orders of Chivalry, Dosen still spent half a day to tear down one of the castle's walls. Next, the 4 Orders of Chivalry's knights swarmed in. Levis, Trick, Eunice, plus Liszt, the 4 elite Earth Knight of the Poison Medicine School, could be described as a super luxurious combination. Pushing forward all the way, in less than an hour, the siege of Greenleaf Castle had ended. This time, the 4 Orders of Chivalry's elite knight had gathered together, and the losses were even smaller. The Black Orders of Chivalry only had 5 knights killed and 10 knights seriously injured. After 3 battles, the Black Orders of Chivalry's 142 knights, 14 were killed and 29 were seriously injured. There were only 99 knights left who could still fight. In addition to the military achievements and the previous harvest of Liszt, there were not many other spoils of war that could be privately divided. Only some gold coins. Most of the supplies had been moved away, especially the valuables, which were taken away by the knights' relatives to hide in the Iron Hoof City. Marquis Bull had long been prepared to assassinate the Sapphire Dragon and face the Grand Duke's revenge. That night, the 4 Orders of Chivalry, with bulging gold coins in their pockets, met up with the Count. "Thank you for your hard work, everyone," The Count set up a banquet in the camp to welcome the 4 orders of chivalry's commanders. However, there was no wine, only a big meal. Eunice looked ashamed. "I'm sorry, my lord. I let you down." "Your performance was really disappointing, Eunice," said the Count. "Count Snader is just an ordinary Sky Knight, and the quality of his followers is far behind yours. Without the support of List, the proportion of your losses would have been far higher than the other side, and it was in the flat ground." Eunice knelt on one knee and said nothing. The Earl waved his hand. "You will have to bear the consequences of this mistake. But now you still have a chance to make up for it. Merge the Grey Orders of Chivalry into the Black Orders of Chivalry. You will be List's assistant." Eunice did not complain. "Yes, sir." List didn't care either. He did not mind Eunice taking a share of the loot, as he was the leader of the Orders of Chivalry. All the credit had to go through him to be distributed to the members of the Orders of Chivalry. In the Knight system, the Great Lord was only responsible to the Lesser Lord and his direct knight. All the achievements of the Orders of Chivalry or the Knight Squad led by the Lesser Suzerain would be credited to the Lesser Suzerain. After the Greater Lord distributed the rewards to the Lesser Lord would go back and calculate how the rewards should be divided among his knights. Now, Eunice's reward would also be calculated by List. "Sir Earl, with the help of Viscount Eunice, the Black Orders of Chivalry can take on more tasks." He responded loudly with a plan in his mind. The more Black Orders of Chivalry rendered, the more likely he was to be made a Viscount. As long as he was made a Viscount, everything would be fine. He could withdraw funds from Flowertown and distribute them to his knight subordinates as rewards. It did not matter even if he had to bear some debts in the short term. The ownership of the Black Horse Island was the most important result. The Earl understood List's thoughts. He nodded. "Dosen will be of great use. The Black Orders of Chivalry will naturally need to recognize more tasks. So, let's plan how to capture Caraway Castle. We will rest for a day and immediately start the siege. Get ahead of everyone and complete the cleanup of Oxhair City. Bow and arrow suppression." Dosen released magic rock grenades and rock thorns. This routine was repeated all day. Lee William rode his horse and patrolled under the castle. As long as Snader dared to show his head, he would not hesitate to rush over, intercept Snader, and fight. When Dosen's magic was exhausted, the Orders of Chivalry withdrew. After Dosen recovered, the Orders of Chivalry rushed over again and continued to suppress with arrows. Back and forth, the Knight of Caraway Castle could only watch as Dosen dismantled the castle and bombarded it from the windows and other positions. Every rock grenade could break a crack in the wall. In less than 2 days, a wall could definitely be taken down and the door of Caraway Castle would be opened. So the battle went as expected. The next morning, Earl Snade of Caraway Castle could not bear it. While the Orders of Chivalry of Coral Island retreated to rest, he quickly led the Orders of Chivalry to rush out and launch a charge. Unfortunately, his actions were expected. With binoculars at all times, it was difficult to escape the surveillance of Caraway Castle. The decisive moment has arrived. The sacred swordmaster of Waves Lee William raised his long sword, 2 gems, 1 yellow and 1 green, glittering brightly. Charge! Orders of Chivalry of Caraway Castle launched a charge. Orders of Chivalry of Coral Island also launched a charge. Caraway Castle had about 300 knight, while Coral Island had about 500 knight. There was a great disparity in strength. Snade was an ordinary Sky Knight, while Lee William was a Sacred Swordsman-level Sky Knight. The outcome of this battle had already been written when Dosen joined the battle. The southwest wind blew and billowed sand and dust filled the sky. 2 torrents of cavalry quickly approached. The tremors of the horses' hooves made it seem as if an earthquake had broken out within a radius of several kilometers. All the beasts and birds were frightened and fled in all directions. Only the uniform charge chant reverberated over the battlefield. Charge! All troops attack! Riding Black Dragon, List charged side by side with Dosen. In the face of such a torrent, he suddenly felt that each individual was really insignificant. The integrated orders of chivalry were the real war machines. All kinds of chi filled the air and mixed together, concentrating everyone's essence, energy, and spirit. The surging chi mixture involved the chi within each knight's body, increasing their explosive power by at least 20%. Holding the knight's spear in his hand, his body rose and fell along with Black Dragon's charge. Suddenly, 3 lines of the Song of Gale appeared in List's mind. The wind rises and the clouds fly. Vega returns to his homeland in the sea. Brave warriors guard the 4 directions. The spears were about to collide. He quickly concentrated his mind and issued an order. Dosen multiple rock thorns. Dosen's magic power had yet to be completely restored, but it didn't take much effort to cast multiple rock thorns a few times. In the blink of an eye, the formation of Black Orders of Chivalry and Orders of Chivalry was disrupted by the rock thorns. The battle aura that was connected together was scattered. The enemy knight lost its strength boost, and its momentum of charge came to a halt. The Black Orders of Chivalry, with List and Yunus as the arrowheads and the ferocious Teuton Dosen as the ferocious behemoth, instantly tore through the opponent's defenses. Like 3 sharp knives stabbing into their chests, they began to disembowel their bellies. Pucci, the knight's spear pierced through an earth knight. In the blink of an eye, the 2 cavalrymen collided. Blood and flesh splattered. Chi and horses danced. If a knight's spear was broken, he would immediately replace it with another. If a knight didn't have time to replace his spear, he would raise his shield or draw his sword. In just a few breaths of time, the Black Orders of Chivalry, with the help of Dosen, had already penetrated the opponent's formation. Turning his horse around, the connected chi didn't scatter, and immediately began the second round of charge. At that moment, thunder rumbled in the sky, attracting List's attention. List was momentarily absent-minded. He looked up at the sky and saw a dark green light and a light purple light colliding with a loud bang. Thunder rolled and lightning flashed. Heavy rain poured down. Chapter 384. The thunderstorm did not affect the charge of the knight on the ground. List was bent on seizing credit, so after defeating the opposing Orders of Chivalry, he immediately rushed to the side of the Orders of Chivalry, taking advantage of the few rockthorns Dosen could still release, to defeat a group of knight and expand the battle. 500 versus 300, he had the advantage in strength. Coupled with Dosen's charge, the battle was one-sided. It was only a matter of time before the knight of Fragrant Celery Castle was eliminated. Covered in blood, List already didn't know how many Earth Knights he had sent flying with his knight spear. Dosen was protecting him by his side, and Paris could use her light shadow ability to rush into the battlefield at any time to rescue him. Therefore, his battles were all open and unrestrained. This kind of open and unrestrained fighting power matched with his chi attribute. When all the knight spears were broken, he looked at the entire battlefield. The knight of Fragrant Celery Castle was utterly defeated, surrounded and cut by the Coral Island Orders of Chivalry, charging back and forth. Jonas! He gave a loud shout. Jonas, who was fighting frantically, turned his head, his eyes bloodshot, his reason barely remaining. What's the matter? You take command. I'm going to support Sir Count. With that, List urged his horse to gallop away from the main battlefield, followed by Dosen. After transferring command on the way to support the Count, he quickly switched to the swift shadow bow. However, he wasn't heading in the direction of the battle between the 2 Sky Knights, but in the main camp. As he approached the main camp, he galloped while shouting, "Open Loki's cage!" The retainer knight guarding the main camp hurriedly opened the cage containing the chocobos. List whistled, and the chocobo Loki hopped over and carried him on its back. "Take care of my horse." After explaining, List gave the order and the chocobos flew towards where the Sky Knight was fighting. The Sky Knight could teleport for a short period of time, and that was a huge threat to List. But the chocobos, which were also good at jumping, could effectively evade the Sky Knight's attacks. Letting him participate in the battle would guarantee his safety. On the way, he blew another whistle. Soon, another whistle sounded not far away. It was Paris' response. After making sure he was safe, The chocobo took him to the battlefield, where Llewellyn, the sword saint of waves, was suppressing Count Snade. Count Snader was of the thunder attribute. His whole body was flashing with thunder and lightning. However, Llewellyn's water attribute had the beauty of subduing hardness with softness. Surrounded by water vapor, he could always deflect the opponent's thunder strikes. "Count, I'll lend you a hand." When List shouted, he had already drawn his bow and shot an arrow. He had already mastered the basic archery skill, 3 arrows at once. The 3 arrows flew in a triangular formation, and with the help of the swift shadow bow, they attacked Count Snader from 100 meters away. He had practiced multiple arrows. He had mastered double arrow and triple arrow, but had not mastered multiple arrow and ultimate meaning yet. However, being able to use triple arrow at will was enough to announce that he had mastered it. At first, Count Snader did not take List seriously. Riding a strange bird did not change the fact that the Earth Knight was weak. Without flying, it was hard to do any damage to the Sky Knight. But the speed of the 3 arrows still scared him. In the blink of an eye, the arrows were already in front of him, forcing him to pull back his sword to block them. Once he lost his footing, he had to face Llewellyn's endless attacks. It was as if he was facing heavy waves, one after the other. Then, tragically, he found that List had shot 3 sharp arrows at him from another direction, cooperating with Llewellyn's attacks. The arrows were still as fast as lightning. "How dare you, Earth Knight, interfere in the battle? I'll kill you first." Snader was furious. He crazily operated his thunder fighting energy to increase his speed. Then, he gave up on Llewellyn and turned to attack List, who was sneak attacking. Llewellyn followed closely and warned, "Be careful." List did not need to be warned. He was already careful enough. "Dosen, stop him." Dosen, who was guarding beside him, pounced on Snader. The intermediate world of Warcraft was fierce. He threw a rock grenade at random, forcing Snader to land on the ground to dodge. Thus, Snader's killing plan was stopped. Facing Dosen, who looked like a flying dust dog but had a huge body, Snader did not choose to fight him head-on. Instead, he took a detour and chased after List. However, when he raised his head, he saw that List, who was not far away, had already hopped a few hundred meters away on the strange bird with a long neck and legs. Snader had no chance to chase after Snader at this distance. Llewellyn and Dosen pounced at him at the same time. "Snader, do you think you can kill anyone else in front of me?" Llewellyn descended from the sky. The gemstone on his long sword shone brightly, rolling up a huge wave that engulfed Snader. "Ha!" Snader fought back with all his might. His long sword was wrapped in countless lightning bolts, striking the wave crazily. Water splashed and sparks flew in all directions. The ground around him turned into a pool of water. Most of the grass was burnt and emitted yellow smoke. Before Snader could catch his breath, the ground under his feet suddenly split open and a rock spike went straight for his anus. Snader was so scared that his hair stood up, raising his armor by 1 centimeter. He hurriedly jumped away and narrowly dodged the rock spike's sneak attack. However, at that moment, the wind whistled in his ears. 3 more sharp arrows flew toward his neck, cheeks, and chest. Snader had no choice but to quickly bend his waist and pull out his sword to block the 3 arrows. He could not stop the attacks at all. Llewellyn's longsword made it impossible for Snader to dodge. Sparks burst out of the armor on his chest, and he was sent flying by a powerful force. Puff! Snader spat out a mouthful of blood from the hole in his mask. He was already injured. "I'll kill you while you're down." Llewellyn, List, and Dosen joined hands to attack Snader again. Snader was no match for Llewellyn. Coupled with the intermediate world of Warcraft's Blizzard Beast and the superb archery of List, there was no way he could compete with Llewellyn. In less than 3 rounds, Snader was hit twice by Llewellyn's sword. When he fell to the ground, Dosen's rock spike grazed his leg. He even took an arrow from List in the air. Although the arrow did not penetrate the armor made of an unknown material, The warrior energy on the arrow still exploded and made Snader stagger. "Llewellyn, I'll remember you." Snader roared and madly used his warrior energy again. He turned around and flew into the air, trying to escape. However, no one would allow him to escape. Llewellyn's eyes were sharp. His long sword stirred up endless waves and pulled Snader back to the ground. List also roared, "Dosen, bite and entangle." At the same time, he pulled out 6 arrows, put 3 in his mouth, and put the other 3 on the bowstring. He used the ultimate skill of multiple arrows, multiple phantom arrows. The first 3 arrows flew in a spiral, and the last 3 arrows quickly caught up and collided with each other in the air. They changed their trajectories by relying on the warrior energy attached to them. No one could catch the arrows after they changed their trajectories. It was as if the 6 arrows had turned into 100 arrows, and the sky was filled with the shadows of arrows. The wave-like attack of the Sword Saint and the crazy bite of a ferocious beast made Snader unable to concentrate. As a result, Snader couldn't focus his attention at all. He couldn't see the trajectory of the arrow, nor could he fly again. Naturally, he couldn't dodge this ultimate attack. The next moment, he felt dizzy. He raised his long sword hesitantly to block the arrows. The shadows of the arrows disappeared, but he did not block anything. In an instant, his left knee was in great pain. All 6 arrows hit the same point. Although they did not penetrate the armor, the concentrated explosion from the same point made a deep dent in the armor. The warrior energy exploded. His knee was hit so hard that it was almost twisted. His whole leg was numb, and it was difficult to even lift it. When he looked up again, he saw Dosen opening his bloody mouth and biting at him. "Go away!" He summoned his Thunder Warrior energy and fiercely slashed with his sword. He used all his strength in this slash, and it was so exquisite that Dosen could not dodge it. His shoulder was directly cut, and Dosen screamed and flew out. However, this was also Snader's last show of strength. Puff! Chapter 385. Snader did not die. The Sky Knight was pierced through the chest by Llewellyn's sword. His strong physique still supported his vitality, but he lost his combat effectiveness and was seriously injured and dying. The battlefield quickly ended with Snader's curtain call, and the Knight of Caraway Castle disappeared. These knights, who had spent countless resources to cultivate, all ended here because of the Grand Duke's anger. List, who had calmed down, could not help but sigh. The number of knights sacrificed in several years of development was probably not as many as the number killed in the Battle of Ironhoof Island. The Earth Knight, who was high and mighty in the eyes of the civilians, was harvested like a dog. The shock existed in the hearts of every knight who had won the battle. However, this was the aristocracy under the knight system. Traitors had to pay with their lives in order to deter more knights to be loyal to their lord. "Collect the names of all the victims and give them to me." The Earl rode his horse and slowly walked through the blood-soaked battlefield. He said in a low voice, "Their lives will not be sacrificed in vain. Their glory will be passed on to their children, and you will also enjoy the supreme glory after the war." Roar! Roar! The victorious knights raised their spears and swords and shouted in response to the Count's promise. When the shouting stopped, the battlefield that should be cleaned continued to be cleaned. Captain Leyden and Viscount Jonas were busy counting the casualties. Marcus rode to List's side and reported solemnly, "My lord, Russell Steele died in battle." Russell Steele. The Earth Knight who joined him with Randy Kettle was second only to Marcus. He was one of the first to become List's followers and often attended banquets in the castle. Compared to the last follower, Leslie Deadleaves, Russell Steele was more familiar to List. After a moment of silence, he forced himself to cheer up. "I will remember his name, Teacher Marcus. Tell everyone in the Knight Squad that glory is waiting on the road ahead. At the end of the battle, everyone can enjoy it, whether sacrificed or survived." From the moment we entered the battlefield, we all understood this principle. To be able to charge and die in battle for our Lord is also our honor. Marcus clenched his fist and replied, "Moreover, We are very honored to be able to follow behind you, my lord. With your strength, you can already participate in the Battle of the Sky Knight, and you will definitely obtain noble authority. A noble authority, huh? List gazed into the distance. In the Battle of Oxhair City, his battle achievements were absolutely glorious. First, he defeated the Orders of Chivalry in the main city, then rushed to the aid of the little river city and attacked the Nameless Castle. Together with Levis and Trick, they seized the Green Leaf Castle. Finally, he returned to Oxhair City and assisted the Earl in killing the Sky Knight. Such a contribution might not be enough to make him a Viscount, but it was definitely not far away. After the rest, he might be able to participate in the Battle of Iron Hoof City and get another credit. In this way, the Viscount of Black Horse Island was already a sure thing. One step at a time. Sooner or later, what belongs to me will be mine, and no one can take it away. Turning his head and calling Dosen, whose shoulder was injured, staggered to catch up. Snade's sword was far from what the one-year-old Dosen could contend with. If it was a one-on-one fight, Dosen might have been beheaded. Touching Dosen's big head, List rode the chocobo and rushed to the occupied Caraway Castle. The Earl had taken the seriously injured Snade to the castle for interrogation. Perhaps he could find out the secret behind the dragon-slaying incident from his mouth. In the room, the Earl was interrogating Snade. "What order did the Marquis Bull give you?" Snade clutched his chest. His breath was weak, but he was surprisingly cooperative. "Defend Oxhair City and resist the invasion of the Orders of Chivalry on Iron Hoof Island." Why did he do that, do you know? Of course I know, because the Marquis is going to complete the great cause of dragon slaying. Do you think you can participate in something like dragon slaying? The Grand Duchy of Sapphire has lost its dragon. Do you think you or all of us can get a better ending? I can't decide all this, but I'm looking forward to change. Snade's eyes were a little unfocused. The Marquis has already made all arrangements, including now, everything is within his plan. Lee William, you did beat me today, but it doesn't mean you can still win in the future. The Earl sneered. You're going to die. How can you beat me? When the Grand Duchy of Sapphire disintegrates, you people will be buried with it. My children have been safely transferred, and they will regain the glory of Caraway Castle and go further. Disintegrate? No, the Grand Duchy of Sapphire won't disintegrate, but the Iron Hoof Island will definitely be destroyed. In fact, the Orders of Chivalry that Marquis Bull used to break out have been blocked by the Grand Duke's Orders of Chivalry. None of you can escape from the Iron Hoof Island, and your children can't survive. They will be burned to ashes by the Grand Duke's anger. Haha, you'll soon know that the Sapphire Dragon is dead. Or not dead. But it will be seriously injured and dying, and then... Snade raised his head, looked at the Earl and grinned. Ahem! There will be a new wave of assassinations. That dragon won't live long. A new wave of assassinations. According to the time, the assassination should have ended, and the news of the Sapphire Dragon's death will soon spread to the Eagle Kingdom and the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom, especially the Eagle Kingdom's Orders of Chivalry. They will soon launch an attack across the sea to clear this area. The new wave of assassinations shocked Lee William, but he didn't show it, and remained calm. I'm very curious. What good will the Eagle Kingdom get for clearing this area? Sir Marquis will lead us back to the mainland. Back to the mainland? The Earl shook his head, and said in a sarcastic tone, How much glory can we get even if we return to the mainland after losing our foothold? Everyone yearned for the mainland. The Sapphire family couldn't get a foothold on the mainland, so they came to the sea to establish a country. Although it was remote and lacked resources, it was a piece of land that could shelter them from the wind and rain. The nobles here were used to the current way of life. The war was far away from the islands and took place on the mainland. Few people wanted to return to the mainland, so they had taken root on the islands in this sea. Then he asked again, but Snade couldn't reveal any more information. What do you think of what Snade said? After a round of interrogation, the Earl asked several Orders of Chivalry. Will the Sapphire Dragon really be assassinated a second time? I doubt it. I think he's just bluffing, and the Grand Duke won't let his defense down. Levis said. List pondered for a moment. He put forward his opinion. Father should immediately contact Marquis Grindstone and test his reaction. I believe that Marquis Grindstone definitely knows about the situation of the Sapphire Dragon. Or we can continue at our own pace. If there's any news, it will soon spread. Why don't we see how the other families react? Lee William was just the Earl of Coral Island. There were still 6 marquises in front of him to attract attention, so there was no need to act in a high-profile manner. Immediately, List added, and I suspect that things may not be as Snade said. His son is likely to be controlled by Marquis Bull, so he has no choice but to defend Vanilla Celery Castle. And the second wave of assassination of the Sapphire Dragon is just a rumor deliberately spread by Marquis Bull. Chapter 386. The interrogation lasted for half an hour. The result was the same. I have nothing to say. William, give me a quick death. Snade was coughing up blood. He couldn't hold on any longer. This is pointless persistence. Lee William shook his head and sighed. It doesn't matter if you say it or not. The glory of the night is always on my side. After that, he pulled out his sword and pierced it into Snader's chest. Blood gushed out along the blade. Snade's pupils suddenly dilated and then contracted violently. All his breath stopped at this moment. He died, the Sky Knight, died in one of his rooms in Caraway Castle. Poochie. Lee William pulled out his long sword and strode out of the room. At the same time he ordered, arrange for tonight's vigil. We will be stationed at Caraway Castle for a day and wait for the next step of the battle plan. Yes, my lord. In the study, List was searching carefully. The Count had already killed Snader, and his smoke mission had been completed. Mission completed. Reward. Advanced Dochi Manual 15 kg Thunder Sky Shocking Flash. Without a doubt, it was not the secret book of fire attribute that List expected, but the secret book of thunder attribute that Snade cultivated. No matter what, with this high-grade Chi secret manual, he could use it to trade for a high-grade fire attribute Dochi manual. The nobles had a monopoly on high-level combat aura manuals, but no one would mind collecting more types of combat manuals. Even if they did not use it for themselves, they would still use it for their descendants. The attribute of combat aura was only slightly related to bloodline inheritance. There were many people who had different attributes between their fathers and sons, and List was one of them. When he first transmigrated, he seriously wondered if he was the descendant of Old Wong next door. After all, the Count's fighting chi was of the water attribute. His brother and sister were also of the water attribute. His grandfather, uncle, and cousin were not of the fire attribute. He was the only one with a fire attribute Dochi in this big family, which was a little embarrassing. However, most of his appearance was inherited from his mother, Melissa, and a small part still had the Count's shadow. All in all, he was undoubtedly of the Count's bloodline. He had only inherited the best genes from his parents. Where is this 15 kg Thunder Skyshock Flash hidden? Snader should observe and speculate from time to time. It's impossible for him to hide in a secluded place. Lord Baron, please take a look and see if this is what you need. The knight sent by the Count to check the spoils walked over with a thick book in his hand. This was found in Snade's bedside cabinet in his bedroom. It's a handwritten copy. Judging from the name, it seems to be a senior book of fighting chi. He took the book. Seeing the familiar handwritten words, 15 kg Thunderclap Skyshock Flash, he immediately heaved a sigh of relief. This was the book without a doubt. Tell the Count that I'll keep this secret manual for now. I'll make a copy for him later. Yes, Lord Baron. List finally had the mood to look at the updated smoke mission after obtaining the high-level Chi secret manual. Mission. Count Snade's last sword strike caused serious damage to Trembling Woods. Apart from physical damage, it also caused mental damage, making it feel the threat of life and death. Please build a suit of armor for it to increase its sense of security. Reward, Dosen's new magic. Oh, Seeing the mission reward, List felt much better. Dosen is going to learn a new magic. It seems that this war has made it grow up quickly. Snyder's last sword had hurt Dosen's bones. But with World of Warcraft's physique, it was not a problem. The wound would heal itself after a while. But he did not expect that Dosen's soul was also hurt, and it needed armor to increase its sense of security. Then make one for it. There are too many Earth Knights who died in the battle. Since we have collected a set of fine steel armor, we can dismantle several sets of armor and tie some pieces of armor together with silk thread to make a dog armor for Dosen. Horses had horse armor, so dogs could have dog armor. Immediately, he sent a squire knight to dismantle the armor. In order to fit the knight's fine steel armor, it was made of pieces of perforated iron and tied together with special silk thread. As long as the iron pieces were collected and tied again, a bigger armor could be made. Just use this method to make an armor similar to Mackay's for Dosen. Do you understand? He instructed for a while and then became impatient. As the commander of the Orders of Chivalry, he had a lot of work to do, so he could only ask the squire knight to do it. As for himself, he was involved in the distribution of the spoils of war and future battle plans. The spoils that could not be divided would naturally be sealed up, and the spoils that could be taken away would not be left to the Grand Duke. Such a heavy casualty rate was the highest among all the previous pioneering orders, and a large number of spoils of war were needed to make up for it. There are no elves, no precious treasures, but we found a lot of magic equipment from the dead knights. I will distribute these according to the contribution of each of your orders of chivalry. Just complete the distribution, don't leave anything behind, don't give other people an excuse. The Count said. List and the others naturally agreed. Yes, Sir Count. Among all the orders of chivalry, the Black Orders of Chivalry received the most magic equipment. The Count even assigned Snyder's sword to List. List, I am proud of you. I have always looked forward to us fighting side by side, but I never thought that you could help me kill the Sky Knight so soon. The Count patted List on the shoulder with relief. His son, who had disappointed him the most, had become the best young knight. At the age of 17, he could already intervene in the battle between the Sky Knight. Although most of the credit should be given to Dosen, List's own superb archery was also commendable. Snyder's sword is a gemstone weapon that is not much worse than my sword. If I am not mistaken, the material of the blade is derived from the thigh bone of some intermediate World of Warcraft. It is very finely polished and plated with a lot of fine gold by the magician. It is indestructible. The nature of the magic metal fine gold was indestructible. It was a big sword with a slightly curved blade, a bit like an English broadsword. It was slightly shorter than the red blood sword that List used, which was similar to the German double-edged sword, but the blade was wider. It was also inlaid with a blue gem, which should be the sapphire produced by the sapphire dragon. He received it. He couldn't help but weigh the weight of the sword. It was more than twice as heavy as the red blood sword, which might have been added with mithril, but it felt more comfortable. The bone blade and the fine gold plated with magic made its sharpness very outstanding. The sapphire inlaid at the end of the hilt made it full of power. The magical nature of the sapphire was power. It could make the user exert more power. It was obviously different from the ruby's increase in fighting energy. There is a magic array engraved on its hilt, which can quickly draw the power of the sapphire to burst out a more powerful blow. The sword that injured Dosen should be using the power of this magic array. The Count explained. You can now give it a new name. Sky Cutter Greatsword. List named it without hesitation. Sky Cutter Greatsword. The greatsword that killed the Sky Knight. Levis looked at the Sky Cutter Greatsword enviously. This name is a bit imposing. Sky Cutter Greatsword. List wanted to remind everyone that this sword was obtained by helping the Count kill the Sky Knight, for fear that everyone would forget this. You're tuning in to the Legend of the Vagabond YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.